Just before we start, I just wanted to mention one thing quickly. Hellas & Co. and Sporting Club Hellas are independent missions. They're both run solely by myself. So if you could like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, it would mean the world. Check out hellasandco.com. And without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back to Hellas and Homies. I'm here with a very special guest, first ever female in Hellas and Homies, and also one of the faces of the upcoming World Cup. I'm here with Kat Haddad.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well.
On.
Thank you for having me on. I didn't realize I was the first female.
Yeah, you are.
That actually is quite an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for coming on. So for people that are new to Kat's work, explain who you are and what you do.
So I haven't had the most traditional entry, I guess, into sports media and presenting, but at this stage, I'm a presenter for Optus Sport. And I also have my own podcast show with Olan Tekis and Claude Fabiano called The Born Offside Show, which is, I love it. It's my favorite thing that I do every week. And outside of that, I do a lot of my own kind of content creation and stuff like that. I've worked on SBS, beIN Sports, anyone that will take me. It sounds like I'm just here offering any work to anyone. But I think, I'm kind of at the stage in my career where you take on any football work as it comes. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. So I call myself a sports presenter / podcaster. So I'm in that space and just enjoying it, taking each day as it comes.
Yeah, that's mad. For the upcoming World Cup, if you're an Optus Sport subscriber, you'll see Kat everywhere.
Yep.
You're covering all 64.
So Optus Sport will cover all 64 live and free if you are a subscriber. And some games will be free to people that aren't subscribers as well. Yeah. I think that's just them trying to make the game more accessible, which is great. I will be part of a broadcast team that are following the Matildas. So we're up in camp in Brizzy with them before the games kick off. Then we're going to wherever the games are. So I'll be all over the social media coverage as well.
Where are all our games?
So Matildas are playing in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. Yeah. In that order, I believe. And then depending on results after group stage and stuff like that, they either play in Melbourne, play in Sydney. So they're always going to be kind of East Coast, Australia. Yeah. But for those who don't know, the World Cup is Australia and New Zealand. So some countries are based solely in New Zealand, some are based here, and then all the finals will be played in Sydney.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is there any chance we end up with a game in New Zealand?
No.
We don't match.
We can't do that. Yeah, like we're quite lucky in that Group B that we're in is all based here. Yeah. If we make it through group stages, kind of like the round of 16 quarterfinals, they all start to happen kind of East Coast Australia.
Yeah, right.
So the furthest they'll go is Brisbane from Sydney.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was hoping we got New Zealand in New Zealand.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would have been sick.
I know. But no, so whoever's kind of wins in New Zealand will end up in Australia to play finals.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Awesome. Explain how this all started.
The whole journey.
Oh,
where do I even start? It's such a good question because for me, it's been such an evolution of interest and passion turned maybe I could make a career out of this. So for context, I'm 28. Okay. I left school a long time ago. I feel like I've had 3 different careers at this point. So coming out of high school, I always had an interest in football and sport in general. My friends always used to say you should do that. You should go into sports. And coming from a background with parents in advertising and a brother who did finance, I always felt no, I've got to find something a bit more stable than that.
Yeah, traditional.
So went to uni, I studied broadcast media, and then I ended up taking the advertising route. So I worked in agencies. I worked for Nova, the radio station, on the sales side of things. So I always understood, and I've always been in the audio industry, but in a different respect. And then I got over it. I quite literally woke up one day and said, I'm just not going the direction that I want to go anymore. Yeah. I became the football girl at work. So at Nova, it was really funny. Even though it was a sales team and everything, I was the sport girl, and everyone would come to my desk and talk sport with me or be like, oh, I saw, Liverpool's results over the weekend. I had a rivalry with this tech guy who was a Barca supporter, and I'm a hardcore Liverpool supporter. And it was during the Champions League.
The Trent.
The corner taken quickly, Origi, that whole era.
Yeah, that's mad.
And we had this banter that everyone in the office knew about because he would leave stuff on my desk. I'd leave stuff on his desk. Whoever won, even my ID at the business had a football jersey on it. So I think it became a part of my personality.
Yeah.
And I woke up one day and I said, you know what? Living in Spain was always a bucket list thing for me. I love the culture, the language. I attribute Fernando Torres for the love of the game
the
initially.
exposure.
And that kind of introduction to Liverpool as well. So for me, living in Spain was always something that I wanted to do. And I kind of hit this rut at about like 23, 24, your age now. So I'm not trying to warn you that it's coming, but it might come. But I just hit a rut and I was like ready for change. And I remember I'm Lebanese, right? So when you have an idea about something, like you have to go and pitch that idea to your parents and be like, I've thought about everything. I've weighed up the pros and cons. I know what I'm doing. And I went, and spoke to my parents and I said, I want to move to Spain and this is my plan and I'm going to save this amount of money and whatever. And my parents looked at me and they were like, great. So now that you've told us, we're going to make sure you do it. And I was like, that was too easy.
Yeah.
But I think even they knew that there was this part of me that just like needed to go. And part of going was that, I suppose, aspiration to reconnect with football and like European football, you know what I mean? Go to England, go to Anfield, like do all these things for the first time.
Yeah.
And then I started a blog to kind of coincide with all of those.
Kicking off with Kat.
Kicking off with Kat started. Kicking off with Kat kicked off in Spain. I wrote blog posts about, the first time I went to Anfield or going to Camp Nou for the first time or a game at Camp Nou for the first time. Like those are unbelievable football experiences. They're kind of like religious experiences for people who grow up with the game. And so, it all started there in España and I loved it and it was an amazing experience and I got to go to England a little bit and go to games. But then COVID struck and I came back here.
How long were you in Spain for?
For a year. Just under a year, actually.
Yeah, that's not as long as I thought.
No. Well, same. I think back and it was like living in this alternate reality for a hot minute. And I made great friends and I felt like a local for all of 5 minutes. But came back here and had a full existential crisis. It was COVID. Everyone was having a crisis at this time. But I've had a taste of this kind of football life. And I connected with someone for me who was kind of like a role model, which is Jules Breach.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to meet her, connected through friends, and she became a real role model for me and somebody that I would often confide in on like what's my next step look like, and she would help me a lot. And her advice was so straightforward, and it was always just start doing things that will take you a step closer to where you want to be. And when I got back here, I started podcasting, kind of doing what you're doing in the sense of just going like, no one's going to do it for me. I'm just going to throw myself into a studio and I'm going to start having the conversations that I want to have and start creating the things I want to create. And they're always football related.
Initial podcast called?
It was called Football Chat with May and Kat.
Yeah,
and so I had a friend in England who is an avid football fan. I'd say she knows more about the game than I do, but never wanted a career out of it. She's just passionate. Yeah. And I used to call her in once a week and we'd set up an interview with someone and we called it Football Chat with May.
Who'd you interview?
A few people. So obviously like the Speranza brothers because, I know them very well. They're hilarious.
Funny.
I'm just the biggest fan of the Speranza family. They're so nice. Keegan Linderboom is he's a South African Kiwi guy who was playing for Bangkok FC at the time. So it was a bit of an interesting kind of chat that we could have.
It's nuts over there, South Asia.
The stories that he told us were insane.
People wondering, like NPL 1, you get like what, 500 to 3,000 people. Some of those guys go over to Southeast Asia and on a big day, what's his name? Aaron Evans, I think. He played in front of 100,000 people.
Yeah. Big Indonesian football, people don't understand.
Yeah.
You don't understand. I remember having a conversation with a taxi driver when I was in Bali. And I said, I've heard that football's really big here. And he's like, he just started going off about how they live and breathe it. And it's violent. Like the fans are violent over there. Like we talk about issues here.
Yeah, not as
Go to Indonesia if you think that it's bad here. But he was an interesting one to talk to. And then we also spoke to Alicia Bass, who I went to high school with. She played Newcastle Jets for a while. But yeah, just people like that. Anyone I had access to. And that's the thing, like, and that I suppose kind of is part of the advice to anyone who's listening and wants to do what I'm doing is just start and talk to whoever you have access to. Doesn't matter if it's NPL or if it's a Sunday league player, like everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
So just start telling those
100%.
stories. Yeah. But that's kind of how it began. And then that snowballed into meeting Claude's for Born Offside. And then we created that. And then quite literally everything has evolved from Born Offside.
Yeah. Born Offside is one of the top sport podcasts in the country. Recently, you interviewed Anton Ferdinand, like a week ago, or something like that.
Yeah.
But before that, you interviewed his brother, who some people say is most probably the greatest centre-back they've ever seen.
Yep.
What was it like for you? Because you actually sat down with him as well. It's not like a Zoom call. Like a Zoom call, I feel like it can be good. It is good, but like there's a level of like energy exchange when you're actually in the room together.
Oh, for sure.
That like obviously can't translate through a computer.
No.
And you sat, like Rio came to Australia and you guys sat down with him.
Yeah.
What was it like sitting down with someone? Was it hard to like keep your composure?
Yes.
Yeah,
Very.
I'd be shitting it, eh?
So
I'm an Arsenal fan too, but like I still would have like.
Well, I'm a Liverpool fan, but
Yeah.
but and he's, you know, caused some real havoc for Liverpool throughout the years, especially for Steven Gerrard. But it's such an honor to meet somebody who, at the end of the day, regardless of who you support, they're on that kind of pedestal, right? Like they have
Champions League winner, like
the accolades are there. You can't deny their skill, their talent. You can't deny like the influence they've had on the game, and also from a cultural perspective, and looking at like the challenges that Rio's had from like a racial perspective too. Him and his brother, he's played a really important role for people in England and globally as well, who are mixed race or from a minority in terms of finding their place in the game. So I think he represents a lot more than just football.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to talk to him. I mean, we've talked to some great people through the podcast, and I've met some great people in the job that I have. Like Sam Kerr, for example, like when I met her, like I lost my shit.
I would.
I never thought I was that type. Like I really can poker face it in most scenarios, but I just lost my shit around Sam because she's so chill. And I was like, well, if you're so chill, like I felt like I was almost overcompensating for like how relaxed she was. So I was giving too much energy. But anyway, that was so funny. But Rio, he's just got this presence about him where you just know that he's
like proper centre back.
He's just
presence.
the shit. Like he just and not he's not full of himself, but you can just tell that he's like he knows who he is and he's very confident in who he is. And he was so friendly and talkative, and he gave us, all the time to ask all the questions we needed. And it was definitely a highlight of my career so far, talking to him.
Yeah. That would be nuts. Hey, like what, 2 years ago you were doing your own thing?
Yeah.
And
2 years ago, like pretty much to the day, I was doing essentially what you're doing now, which is
your own show.
My own show, and like, I mean, it didn't look this good. Like this is high quality shit.
Shout out
like,
the boys. Thanks.
This
for
was
spot.
not my situation. But I think it goes to show how quickly things can evolve when you're doing what you love.
Yeah. Who was your first guest that you kind of like, holy shit, like this is hard to like kind of keep my composure and hold a conversation?
That's a really good one. I don't feel like there's something about talking to Aussies, right? Like Sam Kerr was probably the first person where I genuinely felt like I'm not hiding it very well, that I'm really excited to meet this person. And I think that also goes back to being female. We're of a similar age. Like I grew up at a time where like we didn't have female football idols. Like I looked up to Fernando Torres or Drogba or like all these players who were big at the time, but not because they were female, just because you knew that they were killing it in the game. But I definitely lost at meeting Sam, most definitely. In terms of
I put a post up saying she's like most probably the greatest Australian footballer of all time.
Yeah.
By the time she's done.
Did you ruffle a couple of feathers with that?
Oh, it was fucking bad.
Oh, yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah,
I stood my ground on it because I just said like contextually, because the whole problem with the argument is like they compare her to Tim Cahill and stuff like that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it makes no sense. But like contextually, by the time she's done, Timmy's hard to compare because he played for Everton.
Yes.
And Kuhl's hard to compare because he dropped off the face of a cliff when he kind of like went to Galatasaray and stuff.
Yeah.
But like, some of those footballers, they didn't win the most trophies, but they like, especially Kuhl and Viduka are like nuts talent. But Sam, on the other hand, is like winning everything, but also the striker. So it's like by the time she's done, she's most probably going to have the award.
Yeah. I mean, she's already surpassed Cahill in terms of scoring the most goals, like international goals. I think it's one of those things where it's this vicious cycle of comparison.
Yeah,
But like
shocking.
for me, it's not the same, but it's like the Messi Ronaldo debate. They are so different. It might be the same era of football. I mean, it's not even the same era of football with Kerr and Cahill, but with Ronaldo and Messi, it's the same era of football, but their journeys are so different. And when you put them side by side, they're so different. The
Yeah.
journey that they took, Messi is like that one club man, and he had that kind of loyalty to Barcelona from La Masia all the way up until very recently. And then Ronaldo was able to dominate in all of these different leagues. So it's so different to have the GOAT debate. And I feel the same way about Sam and Tim Cahill in the sense that it's a woman really dominating in what is a growing sport. You
Yeah.
can't deny that women's sport has grown a lot, but we're talking about like being a pioneer to an extent.
Yeah.
Tim Cahill is part of that like golden era of Socceroos, but men's football had been around a lot longer. Like he didn't really have any shoes to fill. He created the shoes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas Sam, has that comparison to existing or pre-existing sports stars, but also she's setting the tone for like what this new world of women's football looks like.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like such an irrelevant argument. It's like, let's just appreciate them both for what they've contributed and the fact that they're Aussies and we can be proud of them.
Yeah. I agree 110%. She's kind of like Charles Perkins,
Yeah.
like the influence he had
Yeah.
on the game.
Yeah.
Like what Sam will have. By the time Sam's done, because you never appreciate something when
No.
like it's with you. By the time Sam's retired, we'll appreciate like how much she
Yeah.
did. Same with Charles Perkins. Didn't even play for that long.
No.
Man United wanted him. His first Indigenous player in the Australian squad, maybe in the NSL at the time as well.
Probably.
And then first Indigenous man to get a university degree as well. Like, yeah, I think Sam will be on that level of like Charles Perkins, Sam Kerr, Johnny Warren, Les Murray. She'll be
those
with like
guys.
those names that like made Australian football
100%.
really go to new levels.
100%. And I think like there are women that came before Sam, but you can't deny the influence she's had on the game. And I was at a conference today where they were talking about women's sport and where it's heading, and Kathy Freeman came up all the time. Like everybody remembers
2000.
Kathy Freeman and that moment for people of color and what she represented and how she was celebrated for who she is and what she represented and like that whole history behind her. And I think we're stepping into a moment with this World Cup where we're going to have moments like that Kathy Freeman moment. And it's almost like getting ready for like the influence that's going to have on the younger generation. And like, it's exciting for me, but it's way more exciting for younger girls and boys.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting time.
I think if Sam, was it the FA Cup final like 2 years ago where she hit the volley?
I think so. I think it was FA Cup.
If she does something like that volley.
We're ready.
Yeah.
Like we're
if
waiting.
she does something
for
like
it.
that for Australia, it would be like etched in the books. But
Yeah. It'll be insane.
Besides Sam, is there anyone else? Like with Anton Ferdinand, right?
Yeah.
Take away the. Oh, shit.
Could you try again?
Sorry.
No, you're right.
We'll just continue. So with Anton Ferdinand, take away the name, he's still a Premier League footballer. Still, I think he like kind of gets put on a pedestal because of his brother. But at the same time, to play in the Premier League, you're
You can't deny his
top
own
zero,
journey.
yeah,
Yeah.
0.1% of footballers, right?
Yeah.
Interviewing him, who was kind of your regular run of the mill footballer in terms of like at the elite level. Do you get like starstruck still doing that, or is that kind of normal?
Do you know what? I don't get starstruck in the sense of like, I can't believe I'm talking to this person. I think I get a thrill out of it being my job.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I think that interview moment is so much bigger than me face to face with somebody that everybody knows. Like I don't see it like that. If anything, I get more overwhelmed about it doing everyone who's listening justice. Like, am I asking the right questions? Is it like the nervousness that I feel is not about the person, but more so like, am I getting what people want out of this conversation?
Yeah.
So it's more like that, like presenter cap comes on or that interviewer cap comes on, and I'm no longer me like just fangirling. It's how can I make this the best conversation possible? So like with Anton delving into, like it's one thing to be a professional footballer. It's another to be the brother of like you said, one of the best
ever centre backs. Yeah,
centre backs in the world in the history of the game. That's a rather
same position as well.
Yeah, I mean, he really delved into like the expectation that he grew up around, and you know, and how it's on one end he's like, I knew that my name would open doors for me, but it's my skill that would keep those doors open, right?
Yeah.
And so it's such an interesting way of looking at it, because when you do have a famous name or a famous relative like that, like sure, it'll open doors for you, but Rio didn't create his West Ham career, and Rio didn't do those things for him at the end of the day. It was his own ability to push through the expectation and go like, I am who I am, and my journey will be different to my brothers, and I'll play for different teams. And, you know, he had a few moments in his career that really hit hard for him in terms of like the missed penalty, I think
the
in
West
that,
Ham.
that, I believe it was an FA Cup final.
Yeah. 2005 or 6.
Yeah, something like that. He, you know, he said that he would think about it every single day. And it's only now that West Ham have just won the Europa Conference League that he's like, that lifted a weight off his own shoulders. So I think it's fascinating to talk to people like that who, to an extent, you almost feel like because you know so much about them, that their story is very obvious, but it'll be things you don't expect that come out of it. So yeah, I think my focus is always more nerves around saying the right things and getting the right information out of the conversation. And with Rio, that's how I felt too. So I was obviously starstruck to an extent to be talking to Rio, but then my mind goes, who's going to watch this and what do they want to know? And like, that's where my brain goes. That's where the pressure
good
is.
Journalism.
Well, we try.
Yeah. You're meant to, it's hard to talk about as a Fiorentina supporter, but you're meant to interview someone, was it Cresswell?
Yes.
How do you think you would have gone with that, like interviewing someone who you're about to see on the screen, like play a really important part in footballing history for their club? Like West Ham's a massive club. We are too, but like we're inundated.
It's Premier League, right?
Yeah. Like we're inundated with Premier League over here.
Yeah.
But like I think I would struggle to kind of talk to someone who's about to go into such a final.
Yeah.
How do you think you would have went?
Yeah, I think that would have been an interesting one. And Anton's fantastic. Like he was great to talk to because he's obviously got that connection with the club for so many years. But West Ham were really trying to get a current player for us because they're coming out here next month for that game in Perth. And so I think they see the value in like having those conversations with Australian creators as well. So it was a shame that we couldn't. I think talking to a current player is obviously a bit of a game changer too because they're relevant. You know, they're the ones on the pitch. You're almost like, what can I ask you?
Yeah.
I think especially in the work that I've done with like the NRL and players in the NRL, I always feel like, you know, we've spoken to Josh Mansell, right, who is kind of like past his but he's very well known in the game, but he's kind of moved on from his first grade career and he's pursuing more of like the media side of things now. So he's more willing to probably speak his mind versus a current player. They're always a little bit more apprehensive because there's more on the line. Like they don't want to necessarily say anything that's going to ruffle feathers or that they're, you know, like their media team's going to be like, wait, why did you say that?
Yeah.
So I think Cresswell would have been like that. I actually think there's a real value in talking to like the Anton Ferdinand over the Cresswell because you get a little bit more of the truth.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. They're not as scared of the media and like they're not always thinking like, oh, I'm going to say something wrong and it's going to impact my career. The career's done and dusted. Like they're here and they're ready to like tell you whatever. But in saying that, I'm sure we will get an up and coming West Ham player or like a current player.
Yeah, I hope you get that. What's his name? That Ben kid in the back line plays centre back, right back, left back. What's his name?
Oh,
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, but
he's a West Ham junior. He's kind of like what Reece Oxford did.
Do you know Anton totally brought him up in the interview as well?
He's a West Ham kid. I hope
Which
you get
is
him.
so
on.
cool.
Yeah,
it's so cool when they like grow up, like academy and
Or what's his name would be fascinating. Agurd, the Moroccan centre back, because he's had a year and a half. It's fascinating stuff, eh?
We'll work for it. I'll put the names forward.
Yeah. Is Carlton Cole coming? Because I don't mind listening to him.
I think he is.
Yeah,
he was offered to us as well, but we obviously spoke to Anton. We were like, why not make it the Ferdinand family podcast?
Yeah.
Get them all on.
Yeah.
Get the wives on. No, give the wags a voice.
Do you reckon that would fly? Like a WAG podcast?
No.
Peter
That
Crouch
would
and
be
his...
hilarious.
I think Peter Crouch and his partner have a podcast.
one.
Hey?
Yeah. That would actually... Well, and now Maddie Johnson, his wife, like they've got a whole family. Like everybody's doing it. So maybe we should.
You touched on it before, NRL.
Yes.
You're a South supporter.
Yeah, I am.
Why?
Good question. Great question. 2 reasons. Because they're the greatest team. No, I'm just kidding. That's not a reason. My mum grew up in Maroubra. So like she's always had a connection to the club. She's not a footy head. I'm the black sheep of my family. No one understands where I came from and why I have these interests. And my best friend's family are fanatic South Sydney supporters. So we've been best friends since we were 9. Her dad started taking us to games in our early kind of teens. And so I just said, that's it. South Sydney's my side.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you have much to do with the NRL? Do you want more to do with it?
Yeah, so it's definitely an area that I'm looking to go into more so. I think I accepted that this year is very football focused. We've just had a World Cup in December. We've got a Women's World Cup next month. Like it's time to kind of like embrace the football. But I do love NRL and I like do a bit of content on that side as well. But yeah, I definitely want to kind of do what I'm doing in football, but on the NRL side too, because I don't think that there are really any emerging female creators in that space.
No, not. Besides the girls who are actually playing,
right?
Like Kennedy.
Yeah, exactly. And by all means, like we want to hear from them.
Yeah.
But I think it's similar here as well in terms of football. There's not for the love of the game and considering how many people play it and watch it, the community is very small. All us football creators know each other really well. Yeah. And like similar with NRL, I'm good mates with Rugby League Guru and
Girachi.
He's just a legend. And we've worked together for years because the company I worked for was looking after his podcast.
Yeah, right.
And then now that I've delved into this side of things, he's always said that, you know, he'd get me on board to do stuff with him because it is a passion point. But I think it's also just like getting it to the point where like you want to stay in your lane to an extent. Like I know I'm not an expert and that kind of thing. And but I just love the game and I want to create content and share stories. And I think that's why for me, I always found the value in doing the cross-code conversations on Born Offside. Yeah. So we've had, like I said, Josh Mansell, we've had Adam Dewey, we've had Jason Saab. We get these guys on because you don't know that they're football fans.
Yeah.
So like Mansell is a massive Arsenal supporter, like hardcore. Like when Lebanon was playing in the Rugby League World Cup, any opportunity to pack up and go to the Emirates, like he's there, he's at a game. So same story with Adam Dewey, Liverpool supporter, Saab's a City supporter. So like it's great to have those conversations because like that's Australian. Like, it's Australian to have that kind of like dual interest. So I think that's it as well. It's kind of like I love both. So I want to talk about both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your co-host did it, Olin. He dived into crosscodes, even did AFL, which is so funny. Because I remember back in the day, KSI, did you ever see that? KSI reacted to the AFL highlights and he was like, what the fuck is this game? Yeah. I remember thinking from a young age how fascinating it would be to get like Del Piero when like I remember like how old was I, 12 or 13 when he came.
When he was here.
Yeah, and I thought how fascinating would it be to get him mic'd up and take him to an NRL game and get his live reaction on like what he thinks.
I would love to see that.
Because I think NRL, he'd kind of think at first this is like a bootleg rugby, which it is. Yeah. It actually is. But then like to take them to an AFL game, they would have like nothing to equivalent it to unless they've ever seen Gaelic football. So I was like, yeah, I thought that would be sick. And it'd be cool for like footballers playing in the A-League that are from other countries to like take them to an AFL game, sit them down.
I'd love that.
Yeah. And NRL as well, because like some countries don't have rugby, so they have legit no clue what's going on.
No.
Fascinating to get them involved.
I completely agree. I think it's kind of hilarious. I love whenever someone from overseas sits down and watches a bit of rugby league. When I lived in Spain, I had 2 Spanish housemates and like here and there I would sit and watch the highlights or whatever because there was no streaming available. Like when you're not in Australia, you realize how hard it is to access a rugby league. And so I kind of like lost that interest for a little while. And then when I came back, I was like, oh my God, fell back in love with the game. And, but it was very funny seeing their reactions when I would watch it. They were like, what is this? Like you hear the bodies smacking, these men just like, you know, hugging each other.
Yeah,
like
big boys.
And they're big boys. And it's just hilarious because it's so different to anything else. But I would absolutely love to see that. And I don't want to say it was me, but I did encourage on to
Explain it.
I said to him, I'm like, you need to look at, I guess, you know, he's got a great personality. His content is so entertaining, but there's this opportunity to really have that cross-code conversation and compare the games. I'm like, you've moved to Australia. You're now learning about NRL and AFL. I was like, why wouldn't you do a video on the NRL saying like, who's the Messi of the NRL? Who's the Kevin De Bruyne of the NRL? Because it's such simple content, but it's so entertaining. And he started doing it and it just took off. And I think he realized like people loved seeing this English guy talking about NRL and finding that connection to it. And then obviously the whole journey of picking a team and everything, and he's got clubs bidding for him. So it's like between Para and Bulldogs by the end of it, and South Sydney never had a chance for the record. I tried.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, he wasn't interested at all.
South Sydney's real Aussie. Like you're Australian, like international fans I don't think would pick South.
Well, I don't know if you saw my latest TikTok, but Ronaldo was spotted with Russell Crowe in a South Sydney cap. So I wouldn't say that. But no.
And Pepe, while we're at it. Pepe was in that video.
Yeah. I've seen a few.
That was when Rusty was doing, what was Rusty doing? Gladiator maybe.
Surely.
Yeah.
Was it that? Oh, for Pepe, it would have been
like 2009, 2010.
Ago,
yeah.
Anyway, I mean, obviously having Russell Crowe has helped us with our Hollywood kind of profile. But people never expect me to be a South Sydney supporter. It's quite funny. Like I would just start talking about NRL and they'll be like, "Oh, Bulldog supporter," and I'm like, just Lebanese.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with supporting the Bulldogs.
With the random South thing, I have said publicly like it's a marketing ploy.
Oh,
I reckon it is from Rusty, like a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Or someone in his team has gone, we need to figure out a way. We're going to plant people with South jerseys at certain events and hopefully it catches on that people wear their South jerseys.
Wild.
Do you think that's true?
I think it could have started like that, but I think it's at the point where like anybody and everybody is willing to be the random South guy. Like you want to be that guy. Like what is the most obscure fixture that I'm going to in the world that I could rock a random South jersey?
There was one at Tomorrowland when I was there.
Of course there was.
That's not getting on the screen. That's just someone wearing a South jersey.
You know, I'm realizing now all the missed opportunities I've had. Like all these random games I've gone to in Spain and I could have just chucked on a South Sydney jersey and been that person. But I also think I'm waiting for South Sydney to launch some random South guy merch.
Yeah,
don't you think there's a missed opportunity there as well?
110%.
I think this is one thing where I really want to see the NRL take on kind of that Premier League, La Liga football style of merch and like the aesthetic element of the game. Like they're athletes. Like a lot of them are very good looking. Like you should be promoting the game and making it cool and sexy the way that like the Premier League players do it, and the game would take off. And when you look at like the NBA and all of that and like all the style element, there's so much to be done in the game. Like it would go off.
We don't tap into it enough.
No.
They're trying.
Yeah.
Like Fox, Toby Rudolph, they're like trying to like get their own brands, get an aesthetic type of thing. But they're all figuring out as they go.
I know. And when you think of like the Fox, like he's easily like the most marketable player in the game.
Yeah.
Huge social following. Got his own apparel line.
Yeah.
He's interesting. He's funny. He's got it all lined up ready for him. You know, but like we need more players to get to that level as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like Fox, if like internationally caught on.
Oh yeah.
Like people would be so fascinated with how he speaks, like the slang of Western Sydney.
Right.
And like his laugh, his smile.
Yeah,
I think there's big opportunities and like Bizzo and stuff. People would be fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Like that.
They would be.
Like their camaraderie and whatnot and like just rugby league in general, how someone so small can play it. All that type of stuff.
I know.
They don't tap into it enough.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. It really would be.
With the World Cup, I want to tap on it quickly.
Yeah.
The World Cup's coming up. There's so many questions to ask you. I just wanted to highlight something quickly and your thoughts on if any of them can do something at this World Cup. So I think the best thing about the World Cup coming up, obviously being in Australia, I'm trying to go to any games I can. I
Love
did it
that.
in 2015 Asian Cup. We went and watched Bahrain. Shout out Jimmy Jam. I know you're listening. We went and watched Bahrain versus like Iran. We just watched like 4 or 5 random games. And
I
then,
love that you did that.
Yeah, we're 15, so we just got in the train.
Yeah, that's the best.
yeah. But like outside the stadiums, they had like boxes of merch. So I've still got like an Iran flag that I donned at the World Cup.
Sick.
When I was at all my mates like were watching the England game.
Yeah.
Half of them were English, and I had this little Iranian flag with me. They got whacked. And then I still have a Bahrain shirt. And then what else do I have? UAE. I still remember their star player.
You've got some really unique pieces.
Yeah, they had this guy called Omar Abdelrahman. If you know that name, you know good bit like about the World Cup and the Asian Cup.
The Asian Cup.
There was this guy. He was an attacking midfielder for UAE, and I like thought he was like Shinji Ono's replacement.
Yeah.
I still like.
You still stand by it.
I still stand by it. He's still like UAE's best ever player.
Yeah, wow.
And he came when he played the Asian Cup. He was like, wow. The rest of his team was so
That's
bad.
so cool.
But yeah, I still remember that. So these countries, when I was doing my research, I knew a few of them, but 2 shocked me. So the 2 that shocked me were I didn't realize Vietnam and I didn't realize Philippines.
Yeah.
They kind of just slipped my radar.
Well, they're exciting though.
Do you reckon they're a good chance?
Philippines are exciting. I don't know about a good chance. Like, I'm going to be super realistic here. Like, they've both, it's their first Women's World Cup. There's 8, I believe, debutants. So 8 countries who've qualified for the very first time. It's also the first time we've had 32 nations.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting World Cup. It's a World Cup of many firsts. But for the Philippines, what's really exciting is their coach is Alan Stacic, who is former Matilda's coach. So there's a really cool kind of connection with Australia. And look, I don't know how far they'll go, but I think even they are realistic about what an achievement it is to just qualify. Yeah. And I think, every country makes money off being here, like the exposure for the sport, the growth of the game. The Philippines girls, like we've got some Australians who qualify for the Philippines team, as in like dual citizenship. There's some US players too. So like there is talent.
Yeah.
There is talent and like global talent in those squads.
Most of the Philippine squad didn't Stasic come in and go to the US straight away with a list of
like the Filipino kind of dual citizenship players.
Yeah. So for people listening, Philippines women's team were kind of like not really a chance at any given point. Then Stasic comes in. I can't say his name, so sorry.
Stasic,
yeah. And he goes to America. So American college is like one of the better levels of football for women.
It's the most developed, I would say. Yeah. It's kind of set the tone for everywhere else.
Yeah, and just resources, the resources they have access to.
They're stacked with resources. They've got the money, the facilities. Like I've got a friend who played over there, and she would just say it was state of the art facilities.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he went over there, had a list of like a very niche data, found anyone with a dual citizenship or heritage because you can go back to your grandparents, and basically recruited them to play for the Philippines. And gets them to a World Cup, which is
smart.
It's crazy.
Smart,
Some guy did the same with American Samoa. He went and found players, I think from here. There's a documentary on it.
Yeah.
So he went and I think he found a guy in Germany.
Wow.
That had
That's so
lineage, and he brought him back for the games. He was Dutch himself, the coach, and he was just kind of like living. And he was like, "Where can I go?" That the football team's like so they were bottom.
Wow.
And I think he picked them because he'd done like coaching at decent levels.
Yeah.
And he was like, fuck, like I'm just going to go live there. Like I've made my money.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. And he kind of just went there because he wanted to get them off last. I think he ended up getting them like 15 places up at 176 to like 160th or something.
Wow.
The other countries that I'm fascinated with, let me know what you think of their chances. Panama.
I saw them play. I saw them qualify.
Newcastle, hey. Was that them? No, that wasn't them.
No, Panama, Paraguay was their final kind of playoff game. That was in New Zealand.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they were good. Like, I think there's a lot. Look, they've qualified for a World Cup. There's talent on all these sides. I still think that the contenders for like doing really well are going to be, the obvious ones. But I still think it's a positive for those nations to be involved. When you look at like Haiti, for example, them qualifying is huge for that nation. They've gone through so much kind of turmoil within the country. It's the first time in like forever that they've qualified for a tournament of this kind of caliber. And like even for the men's side, like this is a huge achievement that that the women have qualified.
Yeah.
You just see this support for the entire nation. And I think that is what's special about it, is like for a lot of these countries that are qualifying for the first time, it's irrelevant whether it's the women's or the men's teams that has qualified. The point is the country has qualified and the country are proud about that.
Yeah. On the back of Haiti, while we're at it, I'm not sure if you saw one of their clubs. So Haiti at a football level was like fucked.
Yeah.
Excuse the language. And they somehow, one of their clubs had like no resources. Some players couldn't even get into America because they made the Champions League. They won the Haiti top division. So they made the Champions League of like the North America, and they had Austin, who are pumped with money. And they've got this guy called Druisi, who like we won at Fiorentina. He's like a pretty good footballer. And so they went to Austin. Somehow they scraped the first leg with a draw, maybe in Haiti. They would go to America. Some of their players aren't even let in. And then their transport fucks up. I'm paraphrasing here so badly. This was like 6 months ago, and I just remember reading about it on like multiple articles. They somehow went to Austin with like not even their team. I think they had like 11 first team players there on the day, plus like reserves and like kids on the bench. They somehow beat Austin and went through into the Champions League, or went through to the next thing.
That's insane. That's like a movie.
There's got to be a documentary coming out about it. But then the women's was on the back of that as well. Wow. So like it was like arguably Haiti's best year as a country.
Insane. I was, like I said, I was in New Zealand for the playoffs, and I was there at the game where Haiti qualified. They beat Chile. I didn't realize how much Chilean support was in New Zealand. There was a sea of red in that stadium. It was amazing.
How was Kat?
Oh, yeah, I know. Poor thing. She's had better days. Yeah. She's had better days. She was watching it from home and messaging me at the time. But there was this one Haitian guy who was,
I love that so much,
standing there like crying, and I interviewed him for Optus, and he just spoke so passionately about the win and what it meant to him, like the history of football in the nation, but like what it meant for the nation, like more holistically as well. Like it's beyond the football. And I think the one thing when you work in football is you always remember that like social change comes from this game.
Yeah.
Like the amount of power that the game has, that FIFA has in regards to social change. And that's why like when they say it's just football or whatever, like, I don't agree with that. I think it is so much deeper. I think sport in general is so much deeper than like whatever is played on a pitch or on a court or whatever.
10%.
It represents communities, minorities, religions, ethnic groups. It represents like all these different people, but they've come together for like a common goal.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where like I truly witnessed like how important this win was, and something that we almost take for granted a little bit with the Matildas, because they have done quite well for a period of time now. And the qualification, whilst it wasn't guaranteed, it was assumed that we would qualify. We're a top 10 nation in the world of football, so we should qualify. But I don't think you realize how special it is until you see a country like Haiti qualify and what it meant for them. And it's given them something as a nation to look forward to. And I think that is a huge thing for them. And I felt very, honored to be there for that moment as well.
That's the bet. That'd have to be the best part of your job, hey?
Yes.
Saying that type
100%.
of stuff.
100%. Yeah, it's for me, it's the messages from girls who just say, I want to do what you're doing, or thank you for what you're doing for the game. I don't go out every day when I work and consciously think, make sure you do something for women today.
Yeah.
It's just, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the support I've had and the people who've backed me. And, I look at Claude's and Olan, and like they've always backed me and advocated for my work. And through them, I've met amazing people. And all it takes is like one person believing in you to feel like that you're onto something. And so it means a lot when I get like words of kind of feedback, positive feedback from young girls who watch what I do, and it gives them like something to work towards. You know what I mean? Like, that's really special, because I didn't grow up with that necessarily. I don't think it's in like I don't like that whole like I didn't grow up with like role models and stuff. But I think we had role models. They were just kind of different. I think it's really cool to potentially play that role for like a young girl who isn't going to make it as a footballer, but loves the game and wants to find another way to make it their life.
Yeah.
I think that's really special. So for me, that's the highlight. It's obviously those special moments of like witnessing Haiti qualify for the first time, but it's also like the positive feedback that you get from young girls and boys who want to work in the game and they see me doing it and they feel like they can too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Other nations wise as well. These are like, it's really special to talk about these nations, I feel. It'd be easy to come in here and ask you, oh, like England, USA, Australia, France, right? But like, I think with Haiti as well, you kind of touched on it with like the representation. If Haiti go through, like just being here, they get coverage as a country, which is very important because they got a lot of fucked up things going on.
Yeah.
But like also the opportunities, if they go through the round of 16 for whatever reason, the opportunity, we saw it with Australia as well.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like your resource allocation from government kind of gets shifted as soon as you go through to that round of 16 at a World Cup. And I think the same thing goes with all these countries I'm mentioning, especially Haiti and Zambia, which I'm fascinated by. But like if they go through the round of 16, like the change that can happen just for football in those countries, I think is like the most beautiful thing.
It's huge. And it's also opportunities for women.
Yeah.
I think
like young girls in poverty can all of a sudden make a career out of it.
It's, I mean, what it can, and this goes back to what we said before, it's sport, but it's so much more than that. Like the money that they gain, the exposure that they gain. It's also giving somebody who may not be sure what they want to do, it gives them, they might see this World Cup for the first time and go, that's what I want to do. And it gives them hope for their future and it gives them something to work towards.
Yeah.
But as a nation, I think having like a common goal and then reaping the rewards of that too, it's the best thing you can do. And the women leading it, even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in these nations, like Morocco, for example, have qualified for the first time as well. To see a team of women in countries where they've historically not necessarily been the ones leading the way. And it's not to say that they all think like that, but it's just history. They haven't always been the ones leading the way. They get to do that. And, you know, Moroccan men's team did so well in that last World Cup. So they get to feed off the momentum of the men's team. And before you know it, you know, like they've got their whole nation behind them as well. So I think like it's a really special opportunity for women from all of these kind of third world and second world countries to show what they can do.
Yeah. I think what were the other countries I mentioned? China. I'm unaware of them at like a footballing level. Are they quite good?
They're very good. Yeah.
So they've capitalized on the population idea because
potentially, yeah.
Yeah. In football, like I can't fathom how India and China having, obviously there's resources, right? But you'd think with so many people, you're bound to produce 23 that can do it. You know what I mean?
You know, I know what you mean. Like statistically, like you've got so much talent.
At least get to the World Cup.
Yeah.
For both of them.
Yeah.
What did China like coming into this World Cup?
China are a good footballing country. Yeah. Like I'm terrible at names, but there are, and I think that one also I want to preface with women's football is kind of at that point of like we're heading into this kind of new era of women's football where you know the names. Yeah. Right? Like even as somebody who grew up around football, I never knew women's football names. I knew Megan Rapinoe, I knew Christine Sinclair. I mean, I'm trying to think of who else I grew up knowing. And
what was her name? The American striker. Alexis? No.
Alex Morgan.
Yeah. There you go.
So like those are the names I grew up with, right? Now it's like there's so many people that you know, so many stories that you know. I think China is an example of one of those countries where like there are players who are kind of scattered in different parts of the world, but they are definitely a force to be reckoned with. Like when I talk to players who've played against China, they always speak very highly of their skill level. And I think they've got a great reputation for producing talent. Like you said, you know, China has money and they got a lot of people. So if they tie those resources together,
they can do a job.
Yeah.
Is the women's league got the money as well over there?
I think so.
And so with China, like for context for people, Chinese men's players hardly ever play outside of China.
I think it's a similar story though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. So like the only Chinese player I can ever remember playing out of China was a guy called Wu Li, who was Yeah, he was a left winger or a striker. I think Wanderers actually played him at one point when he was real young.
So he
But-
stayed kind of in Asia, came here.
Who?
He
He
played
ended up
here.
in the La Liga with Espanyol
like
2 years ago. But he was like it was big news for Asian football because it was the first time we'd seen a Chinese player become like a marquee outside of China.
Whereas like with South Korea and Japan, like we see
they're
more
everywhere.
of that. Yeah.
They're all across the world.
Yeah.
But with China, they've always kind of been centric to China. So I was wondering for the females
I still
team.
think that is the same, although like I'm aware of certain players that are in La Liga, for example.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a case of like Japan and South Korea are so much further ahead in terms of like that ability to dominate in other nations as well.
Yeah. Zambia we touched on. I think they're the coolest. That's the small nation. So I've got a few questions to ask you now about who are predictions for top 4.
Okay.
If you were to predict, let's go off the men's World Cup preface. Go 3 easy guesses, and then on your 4th,
and
maybe
like
give
smoky,
us a smoky.
All right. So I'm going to throw Australia in there.
Yeah.
I think it's a home World Cup.
If we don't make it to the top 4,
The bar is high.
Yeah.
But we should. I think that the biggest concern with the Matildas is just their inconsistency. But if they can really bring it, I think if they win game 1, the rest are locked in. Yeah. It'll be that first game that will shake them if we don't win it against Ireland. I'm going to say USA are up there for me.
Yeah,
they always are. They're looking at the treble. They won the last 2. So if they win this one, they've won 3 in a row. And I would have said England. I still think that England are in like amazing shape.
Didn't their star retire?
Not retire.
Or is she injured?
Injured. Leah Williamson did her ACL.
Yeah.
So she's their captain and their star player. They're stacked. They are still stacked. You're looking at like the lineup of the best in the WSL. Whoever isn't in the Matildas from the WSL, the rest of them are basically in that England squad. So I would say England for me is up there, although I do feel like the fact that Leah Williamson is missing will impact them slightly.
Yeah. Plus England at a World Cup, even with men's.
You're saying they're cursed.
They just don't do as well as they should. Never have.
The women do better than the men though.
That's good. The men are shocking.
I know. I'm going to say Germany.
Are they a smoky, you'd think?
I don't even think they're a smoky. I just think they're good.
Yeah.
I've spoken to people who like play in the game and Germany always comes up, and it's not the country that comes up in like general conversation. But when I talk to people that play, they're like, no, keep your eye on Germany. So for me, it's put Germany on on my horizon in terms of who to watch. My smoky, I'm going to say Nigeria.
Yeah, right.
Best African team.
Does Ola Aina's sister play for them?
Potentially.
There's a professional footballer's sister who plays for them, but I can't remember
So
who
there's
it
a
is.
few. I mean, I think there are a few who have brothers that play.
Yeah.
One of my favorite players is Asisat Oshuala. So she's a Barca player. She's so cool. Like she's cooler than I'll ever be. Will aspire to be as cool as her. But she's also part of the Lego campaign, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's sick.
But Nigeria, the women's team they've qualified for every single Women's World Cup since, Africa has been a part of it. And they're the most successful African team.
Yeah.
I think they're a force to be reckoned with. I think everybody says Canada are the one to beat for Australia, but I really think that if Nigeria show up, that's a challenge for us. Yeah.
Yeah, Nigeria got that thing with England where they have such a high immigration to England that the players produced, even if they're born in Nigeria, when they move there, like we saw with even though they didn't make the World Cup, the team they actually have on paper now is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because they're given the resources at a young age in England, and then they take that and I hope the women's team do the same.
Yeah,
they tap in.
Me too. I also think I would love to see an African team. We saw, like I said, I touched on Morocco earlier. Morocco, North African team, but, made it so far in the Men's World Cup. I'd love to see an African team do the same thing. We've had Asian teams, for example, do really well. Like Japan have won. But I'd love to see an African team kind of make it right to the end.
Have they ever cracked top 4? Because I think Morocco was the first.
I believe that Nigeria may have before.
Yeah.
At the least, look, I'm not like my Women's World Cup knowledge, as in history knowledge, is not the best.
Yeah.
And I blame the fact that I wasn't a consumer of women's football for like a large portion of my life, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
they have.
New Zealand's chances. Are there chances?
Maybe through the group. They've got themselves not an easier group, but they've got a decent group.
Yeah.
They're in Group A. So I think they come up against like the Philippines.
Norway
are not even a smoky. Like Norway are good.
Yeah. Who's the other team in their group?
I can't remember. I'm like scrolling through the little catalog in my mind of images. I cannot remember. But I remember thinking that like
they should go through.
They could make it through the group. But I think, New Zealand, given how small their population is, they do have a fantastic team. And a lot of those players play in the A-League Women's here.
Yeah.
And they do very well. But I don't know about their chances of progressing in the Women's World Cup, although maybe my famous last words, and then everybody will come for me and be like,
make a TikTok.
You doubted them.
Yeah.
I'm like,
put you in one of the edits where they like.
Look, I never said I was an expert.
Yeah.
It's all opinion at the end of the day. Oh, sorry about that. I'm just going to preface that with, it is my opinion.
One to watch players.
Ooh, okay. Back to Oshuala. I love her. I think watch her.
Nigeria.
In
case you, yeah. Who else would there be?
Do you know what? In the Matildas as well.
Any country.
Yep. I'm going to say, well, this is the thing is we don't have our 23-man squad announced just yet. Similar with all of them. So it's like I can give a name and they might not even get the call up. But I love Courtney Vine. I think, look, everybody knows who she is, but keep an eye on her in the sense of, I think her story is really cool. She's chosen to stay in Australia. She hasn't gone to the WSL. She hasn't gone to the US. She's chosen to play here when I truly believe that Courtney Vine could play anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
She's good enough. But she chose to stay in Australia and she gets the call up time and time again. And I think there's always this debate with the Australia team of, do we take preference of players who are overseas doing their thing over the girls in the A-League doing their thing here?
Same for the men's.
Yeah, I know.
Big conversation.
That's why like Craig Goodwin doing as well as he did was a really big thing for the A-League because it proved a point.
Yeah.
And it kind of said, like, we can do this. We can create this talent and they can hold their own in a World Cup. Courtney Vine is a really good example of that on a local level as well. I was lucky to watch her because I worked on the Dub Zone show for the entire Liberty A-League season. So I was really lucky to kind of see her skill throughout the season and being not forced, but like when you work on the game and you sit and watch a 3-hour stream of those girls week in, week out, you know what talent stands out and what doesn't. And she's an example of a player that like when she's on the pitch makes such a difference. I'm trying to think who else. I feel like, for me, the Spanish squad as well, in general, like I think if you don't know what's going on with the Spanish team.
Yeah, let's tap into that.
It's pretty fascinating. It's I don't even really know the ins and outs in terms of the politics of it all, but essentially there's a bit of an internal disagreement going on where I think around 11 players said that they were not going to represent Spain unless the manager was changed. But the Spanish kind of governing body have stood by the coach to say he will stay.
Do you know what the issue was with the coach?
They have loosely said that there were issues within treatment and, like things that he had said or mistreated the girls and things like that. And not in a, like, they haven't been very specific, to be honest. And I think it's potentially smoke and mirrors, to be honest. And who really knows at the end of the day? I think what is interesting is that a large portion of the players who don't want to represent Spain come from that Barcelona side that are so successful.
Yeah.
And you would think that if enough of them would say they're not going to represent Spain, the governing body would be like, we need to do something about this because we really need these girls in this side. But that's not what happened. They kind of said, okay, off you go. We're looking at the likes of like Alexia Putellas, who was a Ballon d'Or winner, not being on the side for a political issue or for an internal issue that they're not willing to rectify. And they've basically just said, that's fine. If you don't want to play, you don't play. She's made the list, the squad list. Whether or not she turns up to play is a different story. But I think one thing that is really interesting about women's football right now is we've seen so many unhappy teams. The French team, we saw like Katoto, like all of these really famous players pull out for whatever reason, unhappy with managerial decisions, unhappy with the manager in general. We saw it with Canada with the pay disparity and all the stuff going on there.
The Canada one was fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the Canada one was like, how can you be so ignorant to what's going on? You know what I mean? And I thought like, I can't remember I don't even want to like try and paraphrase it, but like the amount of money they were told they were going to get paid and what they actually got paid was just like.
From memory, the issue was that like, it's kind of like a private body looks after the football club.
Like they outsourced their own fucking national team.
Yeah. And then when it came to like profits and distribution of profits,
that was it.
That wasn't included in their contracts. And so when push came to shove and there was all this money to be distributed, like it wasn't done. And so like these girls were winning competitions and not benefiting financially from that, you know, just being paid their regular salaries. And so they boycotted and said, you know, we're not going to wear your jersey and we're not going to represent you until you
And they wore it inside out at a qualification game, was it? Or a friendly?
I think it was a friendly.
Yeah.
I think it was a friendly because the Canadian like football or soccer association were like, you know, we will literally like fine you all.
Yeah.
We will, if you break contract or you don't carry through with what you've signed off, we'll do things, you know, to you to make you regret it. So they all showed up, but they found a way of boycotting anyway.
Yeah. Power to them.
Yeah. They, I think, more or less have come to some agreement internally with all of that. It hasn't, I don't believe they took legal action. I think they were able to like find a solution amongst the team. So they'll be at the World Cup. But it's just an example of like all of these issues that are still going on in women's football. And I think people don't realize how advanced the Matildas are and like how much the FA have done to ensure that women, you know, are treated fairly in football here. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
it's a whole podcast in itself talking about that stuff.
Jamaica have still got problems, hey?
Yeah.
The last time I checked, because I tap in like maybe, especially coming up to like once or twice a week, go onto like a website and see what like the news is.
Yeah.
And Jamaica's still, I'm pretty sure, at a point where players still are considering
not coming.
Yeah. And I can't remember the exact issues, but it's smoke and mirrors. That's the other thing as well. Because like the players don't necessarily, they can't legally. And then of course the PFA is not going to admit to their, or like the FAs aren't going to admit to their own downfalls.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating seeing like, because women's football's still in such a development stage, like seeing their game grow and what the growth comes from is actually such like shocking circumstances, hey?
Yeah, I think sometimes that's where the pinch yourself moments is when you notice how much things have changed and how much they've developed from what they were.
Yeah.
Like there was a whole period of history where women weren't even allowed to play football. Like a lot of people don't even know
less than
that.
100 years ago.
Yeah, it was in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So and I used to know this story back to front, like with the facts.
The dates.
And now my dates are all thrown off because it's all been replaced with other information. But like there was a 50-year period in England, basically post World War II, where they said, you know, women can't play football. It's not the job of, like a woman should not play football.
Yeah.
So like it was left for the men and, you know, they picked up again in the late 80s, early 90s with like unofficial World Cups and stuff being played before that. But the game's like 30 years old for women.
Yeah.
Whereas
98
something the first.
Yeah.
Well, we've been playing like a version of the World Cup since I think like the early 90s.
Yeah. Because I remember America, they lifted the first official one and they still didn't get paid and they won it, which is crazy, eh?
I think like 4 countries played that first World Cup as well. Like it's just insane to think how much it's changed, and it's in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Or it's in my lifetime at least. A lot of this stuff, like to think that when I was born versus now, They're completely different games. And I think that's why I get frustrated when we like compare and we debate and people kind of slander women's football, because you don't have to love it.
Yeah.
Like no one's telling you you've got to love it. But I think, in my opinion, you're not a real fan of the game unless you support all versions of it.
Yeah.
Because it should be about the sport, not about the gender. Like, I think it's irrelevant. You should be able to appreciate a good game of football, whether it's women running around or men running around. And there was this amazing campaign that I saw in Colombia today, actually. I saw this today, and I encourage anyone listening to look this up. But Aguila, a sponsor, were really disappointed with like the turnout of sponsors for the men's game versus the women's game.
Yeah.
Men's game, the stadium's packed. Women's game, bare.
Men's team shit now as well. No, like, yeah, it sounds bad, but they are. Like after James and Falcao went through, they've produced nothing.
Yeah, that's is sad, to be fair.
Yeah.
But like, I'm talking like domestic league. So like the stuff that was happening there, like your local clubs or like, you know, like the A-League equivalent. And they split the crest in half. And said you're only half a fan if you can't support the women's team as well. And then every other club picked up on this and they all started dividing their crests in half.
Yeah.
And kind of running with this whole rhetoric that, you know, a real fan is there for the football and you appreciate it, whether it's men or women, and it's about appreciating the game for what it is. It is not about comparing them, and it's not about just showing up for the men and then acting like the women, you know, don't matter. Yeah. It got like those stadiums full in Colombia for the women as well. And I think it was a beautiful sentiment around, I think, just that, you know, we're ultimately fans of the game. Like you're clearly interested enough in women's football to Google it and see what's happening. And like, it doesn't mean that the Nigerian national women's team has to be your favorite team or that you have to know everything about them. And I don't expect you to be able to list every player for every country, because I can't even do that. Like, we're at that point of developing the game where we're only just learning who they are. We're only just starting to tell the stories. Matilda's got their first documentary on Disney. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if people didn't know the full Matilda squad list up until this World Cup. But then hopefully off the back of this World Cup, you learn those names, you learn those faces. Like, that's the part of the journey that we're on now. And I think it's just supporting the game and being realistic about like how far behind it really is, but not discrediting like the achievements of the women in the game. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
110%.
I think that's my biggest kind of thing about it all.
I think after the first Matildas game, it'll be like, I think I've noticed in conversations with guys, the name isn't the problem. Matching the name with the face is what gets them.
Yeah.
It was the same with NRLW, but when State of Origin comes around, you remember like...
you know Tiana Penitani, you know, who just surges. Yeah. Like, you're able to tell.
Yeah, Lisa Albert and like Kennedy and then Millie Boyle. Like, you start to like match all these names, right? I think you'll be the exact same thing as soon as the Matildas play their first game. Yeah. Like, as soon as we really watch, and the whole country will watch. Yeah. That's the other thing. But the other thing I was going to mention as well, my dad met Les Murray when I was like a kid.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah, and like not like friends, but they became associates or acquaintances, I should say.
That in itself is cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Dad was like quite upset when Les passed. But so Dad brought home like this literature from Les, which I never really got around to until I was like 18 or 19 or 20. And then I kind of got into more literature about football. But I never realized until Les brought it up in one of like this book that came from reading Les's stuff, that the Men's World Cup, that's why Uruguay won it so many times. There was hardly any fucking teams in it.
Yeah.
That's why Uruguay have like 3 or 4.
Yeah. But like, as soon as everyone started going, they didn't win.
Yeah. Uruguay haven't won since. But like, we're literally just witnessing the exact same tale of men's football in a sense, because men's football in the 20s and the 30s had its own, you know, problems. And then in the 40s, obviously it went downhill. Yeah. But women's football is kind of the same. You're kind of just witnessing the growth and the problems that comes with the growth at first, and like allocating the funds, resources, figuring that out.
Like literally finding your feet.
Yeah, you're just watching history.
Yeah, it's you're so right. You can really draw the parallels, because it's kind of the same stage that we're at right now, where it's funding too. It's countries realizing, oh, we should put money into this because it has benefits for youth and like the ripple effect that it'll have. And I think that's why So like with all of the Nike stuff that I do, the biggest story that they constantly tell us is it's what this is going to do for sport after the World Cup, for women's sport and for sport in general. So it's the idea that this is a catalyst moment for women's sport, but the real impact will be seen later. You've got like Legacy 23, which is the whole kind of policy that Football Australia and FIFA and all that have kind of brought about as a result of winning the World Cup. It's this commitment to doing so much more than hosting a World Cup. It's how can we fund women's football and fund sport and create opportunities and facilities and do all these things that like we haven't had before, because they're praying and hoping that there will be this momentum around the sport as soon as the World Cup's over. But not just for football, like to play sport in general. It will benefit. So if you're not a football fan, like this will still benefit like every other sport,
your daughter
because
in the future.
Your daughter will look at sport and go, I want to be a part of that. And like the opportunity will be there more than it has been in the past.
I think the best thing about the World Cup coming up more than anything is the time that it's on.
I know. We're so lucky. Get to be here.
Yeah.
Not wake up at 4 a.m.
Yeah. During the World Cup, you worked through it. We'll get to that. Like you had one of the coolest jobs in the world at the time, especially with the run we had. I never saw that coming. But like, I remember first game I watched in my bed because I wake up at like 6 a.m. to go to work. The second game, I remember I watched that was the second game, who'd we verse? Denmark. Or was that the third game? No.
No.
We had Tunisia second game. We had Tunisia. I remember watching that with mates. That
Duke goal.
That was on a Saturday night. That was our best, maybe that was our best fixture that we had. That was on a night.
Yeah, because it was at like 11 p.m. on a Saturday night.
Yeah. I remember watching that. I'm still like get anxious because I remember that game being so tight, thinking like, oh,
I know.
shit.
We were the whole crew was together at a pub for that, and we were all just whoever wasn't sitting was just standing. We were all anxious as hell, like holding each other, and then I will never forget that moment.
And then Denmark was on like a Wednesday at 1 or 3 a.m. I remember that because I remember, I went straight to work after it basically, and then Argentina was on a good time as well. That was on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, maybe.
Sunday morning, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's all a blur at
Saturday
this
night,
stage.
Sunday morning. But like those are obviously experiences that they'll never take away from us. But I think it'd be really cool to just sit with your mates on 7 p.m. on a Saturday night and find a venue and just like invite all you people you know that enjoy football and watch the Matildas play and just be able to enjoy the moment, not worry about work, not worry about like how to get home. You know what I mean? That was the problem with like the World 100%. Cup in Qatar. Well, with every football that we watch is the time zone. But I think it'd be really cool. Even when New Zealand's playing, I think a lot of people get around them as well.
I hope they do. I hope they do because it's, like they're our cousins. They're our neighbours. We're supposed to look out for them as well. But I think, they're as sport crazy as we are in New Zealand. So it's like there's a cultural similarity there. And I think we just get behind our teams. There's this really beautiful notion, I think, with Australians that when it's on a national level, people do just support. They kind of drop what they're doing and they get behind the team.
Yeah. That was the World Cup.
Yeah.
The amount of people that like, everyone around me knows I'm like football mad because I put Fiorentina on my story. Like,
your football knowledge is amazing.
Thank you. I was a FIFA kid, so I just knew everything.
I love that.
Stav is similar. Like all the knowledge started from FIFA.
Insane as well.
Yeah. But like everyone, people I knew that can't even stand football. They like stop everything they were doing. They were getting up at 1 a.m. to watch it. They were texting me like, dude, this is mental. Like, this is so cool. And then I had mates who didn't really watch it, who went into Sydney for it. And they were like, holy shit, like this is like no other sport in the country, whatever, or in the world does that.
No.
But I hope the Matildas has the same effect, especially if it's the final that we all go to location public and celebrate. Hopefully, celebrate.
Can you imagine we make the final?
Yeah, it'd be cool.
The Matildas make the final. Like,
it'd be sick.
I mean, I hope so for the sake of my job.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm following the Matildas the entire World Cup. So if they flop, I'll probably end up following another team. But I would love to just follow Australia for as long as possible. But yeah, I think, look, we've got that momentum of the Socceroos and people think of football now, they think of World Cups and they remember that moment with the Socceroos or those few moments that we had. So I hope we can back it up and kind of give people the same experience again with the beauty of it being on Australian soil
Yeah.
and at a time that you, like you said, you can get your mates together. You're not asking for too much. You're not asking your mates to get up at 2 a.m. It's like, just come to the pub or come over, watch the game with us. It's on Channel 7. It's on Optus Sport.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it'll be there. It'll be available and accessible. And so I hope we can have those moments.
Free?
I believe all the Matildas games are across
be a
Channel
brain
7.
snap to
Yeah,
not have
yeah.
them free.
I'm pretty sure Channel 7 would do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not working for Channel 7, but I'm pretty sure they would do that.
Yeah. With the men's game, you put it actually really well for someone like Stab's only 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
I think, or maybe 2. But even with 2006, I still remember that. I'm half Italian, so that didn't help my case.
Oof.
Yeah, I remember watching it back like when I was 20 because I never watched it back. And I was like, what the fuck is Lucas Neal doing? Like, how is that like?
No, I know.
You know what I mean? That is like the most miscovered topic in Australian football.
I agree.
That is the biggest brain snapper a defender we've had has had. Like,
because
he's on the floor for like meters before him.
He fucked it.
Yeah, if that's an Australian player going over an Italian defender, I'd be screaming if they don't go down. Like, it's just the nature of the game.
He fucked it. Yeah.
Yeah. But like from the age of 6 up until 20, if anyone said anything, I'm like, oh yeah, like we're divers. Like never really considered, never watched it. Never watched it back.
Thing, like, I'm neither Italian. Oh, I'm Australian. I'm
Yeah.
not Italian. But like, I'm sorry. Like Lucas Neal fucked it.
Yeah.
I keep saying that. Like, keep swearing. I'm so sorry.
No, you're right.
But
I swear all the time.
he messed it up in that moment, and I think people wanted to, you know, blame the Italians for their drama. And like, fair to say, in that World Cup, they had some golden moments of drama, right? Like falling to the ground and whatever. And
they knew what they were doing. That's the biggest misconception. Materazzi knows, Fabio Grosso knows as well. Like they know what they were doing. They weren't exceptional. Materazzi was good, but Grosso was no exceptional footballer. No. Kind of like Ryan Bertram winning the Champions League.
Same vibe.
It's same vibe. Like, no one. He's just kind of like a fullback that kind of squeezes in, and he kind of did his thing. But like I don't know. But that was But back to the point. That was like my memory, right? Yeah. 2010. I remember Brett Holman had a pretty good World Cup from memory. And Jason Kleiner came onto the scene. 2014 was frustrating because we got given such a shit group, but we actually played really well. I thought. I'm 14, so what do I know about football all the time? But like, we played Chile, who was arguably their best ever team, just Vidal and
like
Sanchez.
Their best team that they've had to date.
Yeah, and Borzajua, if that's his name, at left back. And then Spain, Holland, I mean, obviously, no matter when you get them.
Spain,
Holland,
like the two best at the time.
Yeah. Ian Robin, like, what are you going to do? Yeah. And then 2018 was, who do we have in 2018? Oh, God. No, do we have France?
Yes.
And then we had, I can't even remember the rest of we had Denmark as well. And we had Peru.
That's right.
Yeah, beautiful story.
Your memory's amazing.
Yeah, that was hard. But I remember Denmark, that was hard because the France game, Umtiti should have got sent off, if you remember that. His hand's like up here. So, like, these are like tiny memories. And then we finally get like 2022 World Cup. Interestingly enough, I thought our worst squad.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people said that. Like, most underwhelming squad.
And I also thought, I've got voice messages and they were brought up during the World Cup. I also thought Arnold should have been gone well before the World Cup started.
You're also not the only one who thought that.
Yeah. I wasn't like in an alone. I wasn't like, that was a common opinion.
Yes.
And to this day, I don't think Arnie should ever get the sack for what he did.
No.
And considering Argentina went on to win it as well, like
we lost to like the two teams that were in the final.
Yeah. And what he did for the A-League as well. Like Lecky doesn't even like hardly play and he scored that goal. You know what I mean?
I think I've heard good things about Arnie.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of his relationship with
players and stuff.
And even I think leaving his squad choices to the last minute. Why not? Like, if that works for you, if that means that your players are on their toes and that they're doing everything that they can until the final moments to make that squad, then so be it. It means they play their best football.
But that was like really the country's only good memory since 2006, since beating Japan, Timmy Cahill double. You worked during that and you and Stavalike and Kat, the whole team are like the face of it for my generation, right? Like everyone turns to you guys for the content. What was it like during that time?
It was like living in another world, first of all. So I worked the SBS show doing these kind of flashback segments, looking at key moments from every World Cup. And then the final episode, I did a bit of a tribute piece to Les Murray and Johnny Warren.
Yeah.
So I wrote and delivered all of those pieces myself, which I think it was a challenge to obviously write all of those, but I loved researching it. I loved learning about it, especially that tribute piece. To this day is one of my favorite pieces I've ever created in my work.
How did you find approaching such a thing?
I didn't want to overthink it.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of pressure around the fact that, you know, I'm talking about events that are really important to certain people. And, you know, even though I might be talking about Argentina winning in a certain year, like there are Argentinian Australians who are viewing this, who know what I'm talking about, who like this takes them back to a moment with their families where they were sitting on a couch or where they were at a game in a country somewhere. And so they remember these moments. And so I have to do it justice, and I have to explain it in a way that is, it serves that moment the way that it should. And then the tribute piece also, for me, Les Murray is the guy.
Yeah.
Like I think of football in Australia growing up, and it's always Les Murray, and it's Lucy Zelic, and it's that group of SBS faces for me. Like Lucy Zelic, if I was to give you anyone who is...
She was the first woman I remember, Aussie woman,
Same.
like in front of my
Ethnic,
face on TV. Yeah.
Female, sitting next to the guys that had all that credibility. She had the credibility too.
And she was smarter than her brother.
Very much smarter than her brother.
Like, yeah, for sure. But like when like Ned obviously played at like a really high level at the time. And like when she would break down what she saw, even though she was kind of like, how would you put it? A mediator of conversation.
Yeah. I mean, she was like the host, right?
Yeah. But like even when she kind of like weighed in with something or kind of asked like a really good question, you're like, fuck, you actually...
She knows who she is.
Oh man, she was
Lucy...
She is, but like...
And for that reason, I kind of take back what I said earlier about not having a role model. Like Lucy Zelic was the first that I saw. And I remember watching like World Cup after World Cup that she was the host of and saying to mum or dad or whatever, like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I met her this year.
Yeah, wow.
Oh my God, I lost my shit when I met her. Yeah. Look at me. I'm going back to all of these questions you asked me before. She was the best, and she knew about what I had done. And she was like, I loved the work that you did on SBS. And I was like, literally take me now. Like this is as good as it gets. But there was obviously a lot of pressure to make those segments, you know, as good as I could, to do them justice, to speak from the heart, but then also like keep it professional, because it's quite an emotional journey talking about these things that are such important memories for people like us. But it was the best thing ever. Like I learned so much. I didn't try to overthink it.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about the fact that it was like SBS.
Yeah.
It's like, just think of it as, you know, like any content that you do, you want to do a good job of it. But then I pre-recorded all of those, and which was good. So I got them all done before the World Cup.
Yeah.
And then I was able to kind of enjoy the episodes coming together, and my bits were done. And then that tribute piece I did in like the final week of the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I put lots of effort into that one. And like I said, it's one of my favorite pieces. But I also worked on beIN Sports with Nick Stav.
Yeah.
So I hosted and he co-hosted, and he was the stat man for that. A daily show where we got a different guest on every day, and we kind of broke down the games from the night before or from that morning. And I love doing that. So like that was really fun. And it was like the early morning wake ups and producing a new show and hosting a show every day. So like I said, we were stuck in this like world of football, and we'd have a day off, and like we all wanted to be together because we all missed each other. And it was just, I think I'll always look back at it as like one of the best moments in my life, like working on a World Cup with the best crew of people, who hopefully, you know, we continue to kind of work in football together and be those faces that you guys see, and that, we can create something really special for people.
Yeah, that's mad. It would have been so
best.
cool. With your tribute piece, did you come across a book called The Life and Death of Australian Football?
I did.
He's from Katoomba.
Yeah.
Which is like mental to me.
Yeah, because you're a Blue Mountains boy.
Yeah. No one from the Blue Mountains besides Jed, who I've mentioned like before.
Yeah.
Jed's like the only football influence. But Joe Gorman, who wrote that book with Andrew Dietrich as the main person, like throughout the theme is Dietrich.
Wow.
yeah, that book like was like I read that last year and I learned so much about the game in Australia.
That's amazing. Yeah. I learned so much making that piece. Like things I kind of took for granted, other things I felt like I kind of witnessed as well, which is kind of cool too. Cause you, like I said, it takes you back to realizing how far the game has come and like everything that Les and Johnny did in the game, when you actually think about it and how challenged they were by mainstream sport and media. Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying them a little bit when I start talking about NRL and stuff. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like I know you, like you were pioneers for the game, but I think it's just the Australian way that we have like varied interests. But I think it's like I always want to see football progressing and I always want to see us doing more with it because it deserves to have as much attention as any other sport in Australia, if not more, because of how it impacts more lives.
Yeah. And
it's still the most... The sport that has the most participation of any other sport in Australia. Yeah. But it's like the least viewed on mainstream media as well. So it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people listening that may not be fully aware of the two men that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Les Murray is like, basically if you turned on the football, I still remember watching Champions League with my nonno at the age of 10 before school. Like
SBS.
Hearing Les's voice is very comforting. Up until the day he quit. Like,
yeah, I agree.
You just tuned in, and if you heard Les's voice, you'd like slouch on the couch, even if your team was at 1-1 or whatever in the 90th minute.
Voice. Hungarian, Australia. Like, he migrated from Hungary.
So Les came from a generation of Hungarians who were like the best at football at the time, which eventually produced Puskás. As you'd know, the best goal goes to every year under that name for a reason. Yeah, one of the best strikers of all time. Les came from that generation, and he was like the face of what was called wogball at one point in time. I'm Italian. I'll get away with that. But like... Yeah, Les was the first Hungarian Australian, which was at the time a really big community for our football. They were all based out at Bathurst as well, which is fascinating.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, and he was one of the guys who put faith in Attila Abonyi, who went on to be like one of our best ever. And yeah, so Les was like this voice that was kind of like everyone's grandfather in a way. He's just like very comforting. The way he commentated, the way he spoke, and how leveled he was when like. God love him, but like Craig Foster and stuff, when they get on the TV, even Boz, I'm a massive fan of Bosnich. Like they speak with like a lot of animation. Yes. Whereas Les, no matter what he wanted to say, was said with like a leveled approach. And that kind of took away from arguments with people, And
he had a calmness about him.
Yeah. And then Johnny Warren's like the first Australian star boy. Like I think he was raised in Cronulla or Wollongong maybe.
Yeah.
Is he a beach boy?
I think it might be Wollongong.
Yeah.
Don't quote me. We'll double check that one.
Yeah,
Wollongong Wolves.
Yeah, so Johnny Warren, I'm pretty sure, I could be so wrong, but he's like our first star boy. But Johnny Warren was the face of the game for so long. Like Johnny Warren medal still and it would have been hard to do that piece. Congratulations.
Thank you. No, I loved it, and I mean, for me, it was the stories there. I just got to tell it in the best way possible. Yeah. But I think, the story of Johnny Warren was one that I didn't know as well. Like, I feel like I grew up more so, seeing Les on SBS and everything like that, but understanding how Johnny was a pioneer in the way that he, teamed up with the Wogs, as we call it. And he saw the value in this game that other Aussies didn't. And I think,
he was good too.
It's amazing, right? Yeah. To see, I think, we forget, and I guess for a female in this space too, like I'm nothing without the advocates who stand beside me and give my voice credibility as well. So like you've got to start somewhere. And Johnny played that role of being the Aussie face and playing that role to assist the others in that kind of challenge that they had set themselves. And I think I grew an appreciation for his story as well that I didn't really have before. And then when I was at the Dolan Warren Awards a few weeks ago, I met his daughter.
Oh, wow.
And someone had pointed her out to me because I didn't know what she looked like and just said, that's Johnny Warren's daughter. If you get a chance to say hi. You bet I did. Yeah. When found her like right at the end, like I'd had a couple of champagnes and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's mad.
Introduced myself. I said, I loved working on the piece for your dad and Les for the World Cup. And it was just, for me, like, it's those moments. That's what this is all about, is like those full circle moments where you're meeting, people that ultimately, like without them, like your love of the game probably wouldn't exist. Like my parents didn't raise me on football. Literally SBS raised me. Yeah. Yeah. Like I was the kid that woke up and saw a few games on SBS and decided like, no, like there's something here. This is special. And I would just love the game myself. And like Les was the face that I'd look forward to seeing, and Lucy was as well.
Yeah.
And I think it'll always be like that for me.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
What do you remember? So I remember like my nonno's house like laid out for me. Yeah. Because I get mum and dad both work full time. But I remember sitting with my nonno, and he like, funnily enough, people would think like he was fanatical. He didn't really give a fuck. His brother played for oh, sorry if I get this wrong. I think my grandfather's brother played for Bologna.
Wow.
But I don't think they were Serie A. But we're Fiorentina fans.
Okay, I remember all of your
so like Fiorentina, Bologna, and Empoli. We don't get along because we're all from the same thing. But like Nonno didn't really care, but he was really passionate about showing me the Milan teams at the time. So I remember Inter did the treble, and Jose. That was my first exposure to like he's a madman. Like, how does he have a job? Like I thought he was a nutter.
Yeah.
And then like I still remember seeing Mourinho cry on TV when he was saying goodbye to Materazzi, was it, maybe?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do remember.
Because the story goes, he doesn't get back on the bus because he knows he won't leave Inter to take the job.
Stop.
Yeah, and then so one of the players comes and one of the players crying, Mourinho's going and then comes back. Yeah.
What a moment.
Yeah, what a moment. But I remember, funnily enough, this is a very full circle moment. I remember Celtic games.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. There was one guy that stood out to me. He's a great guy, Samaras.
Yeah.
And it turns out Samaras is half Australian. Didn't know it at the time. His dad was at South Melbourne at the time as well. Crazy,
wow.
And that like hit me like a few weeks ago.
That's amazing.
Talking to Stav, actually, we were talking about it. Oh, Sporting Club Hellas. I realised Samaras was half Aussie.
Okay.
Aussie dad who was born here, and then the dad went back to Greece.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, and so like my earliest childhood memories of SBS was watching Samaras play for Celtic because I think they did Barcelona 2-1.
Yeah.
And then
yes, I actually that exact feature's like coming up.
Yeah.
A lot.
It got a lot of coverage.
Especially with Celtics just all in the news recently.
Yeah. But do you have any fixtures or like memories you remember from SBS back in the day? Because I feel like people have different ones.
I honestly don't have like those early memories. I think my football memories were playing.
Yeah.
And like how I got into the game and how I found the love of the game. Like I said, you know, for me growing up watching the game was a very like lonely experience. It sounds really sad, but like I didn't come from a football family.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of like energy to be like, I'm going to get up on my own and go and watch these games and do whatever. But it was going to the games, watching my brother play, or like when I was the only girl running around with the boys on the pitch. Like those are the memories for me that are like the most poignant from my childhood, because that's when I was like really trying to prove a point and really trying to like prove that I was like worthy of being on that pitch. And then I think it was like that love of watching the game, like the professional game came like a little bit later. And that's why, you know, Les and that were so crucial for me, because I was trying to find a love of like that professional game as well. But I think if I was to pick like any team, it would have been like the Spanish national team, I think.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember that left back? He ended up in India like 2 years later, Capdevila.
Like 2 years after winning the World Cup.
Shortest amount of time I've ever seen anyone go from, because India got money before China. I remember that.
Yeah, India were like the Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I used to collect what the fuck they call it, panini.
Yeah, panini cards.
For some reason, he just stuck out in my mind. And
gosh, I haven't heard that name in a really long time.
Yeah, and he still sticks into my mind because he wasn't part of Real Madrid or Barca, which was fascinating to me.
Because most of them were, yeah.
Yeah. The main contingent at least was, right? But he was the left back. Then he ended up in India. But I remember him went from being like 10 thinking like, wow.
That's
like
wild.
Yeah. And that was when then Wanderers got announced like a few years later. I was like, oh, like we can actually bring people over who are, and then Del Piero signs for Sydney. It's like pretty, yeah.
Those were the heydays. Oh, sorry. Hit the mic. Those were the heydays.
Did you go to those games? Like those derbies?
I did. I used to go to a lot of Sydney FC games back then.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like freshly out of high school or like just barely out of high school. Like it was when people were walking from Central Station all the way to the stadium, and like the vibe was just there.
Yeah.
I was also working retail at Nike, and like the crew of people I worked with were a lot of football fans, including Robbie Speranza, and they would all go to these Sydney FC games. And so there was this energy around it, and I would just jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, right. I
Yeah.
can't stand Sydney. Yeah, I don't know what it
Are
is.
you wondrous about
Oh.
it? Yeah,
But like Marconi, it will be.
of course.
Well, it is Marconi.
Yeah.
I still get to Marconi games when I can. I'm from the mountains, so I don't really actually have it. Mount Druitt Ranges is actually the closest.
You're closest.
But yeah, I don't think they'll make the A-League too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of Wanderers was like, because I learned as a kid, you don't realize like the rich versus poor stuff. And I didn't know about the history of the game. I didn't know the A-League was fabricated. Like, this sounds so bad. I'm sorry because you work in it. But I didn't realize it was fabricated.
I didn't make the decision.
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah. But like as a kid, you don't realize it's like fabricated.
Yeah.
Like for all my child brain, I thought these are like clubs of immigrants that have like come up and they've worked their way and there's backstories, and realize it's like I was 5 when it all started. I'll be honest, 16 it hit me when Henry, my mate, was playing for Marconi. I was like, oh fuck, like this is the actual clubs.
Yeah.
Before.
These are the OG clubs.
Yeah.
With the history. Like they're the ones that were established by the migrants
Yeah.
who moved here.
But back to we touched on it before, the Betis Sevilla thing, that poor versus rich thing I saw. And I saw as a kid, even though I'm from the Blue Mountains, I saw this Westy narrative just driven. And like some of the, like what people would say online about Western Sydney and generalizing people from Western Sydney as well. I was like, oh, fuck.
It's a head doer, that one.
Pardon?
It's a head doer when
Oh,
people
it's bad. Yeah.
feed into that narrative.
Yeah. And I just saw the RBB as well. And from watching European football, I knew what I wanted to see was that. I think that's what football's about, is
I agree.
your ultras, if they behave. But like, yeah.
Within reason.
Yeah. Because I'd seen Boca as well. That was like
Boca Junior. I mean, they set the tone, right?
Yeah.
Like that Argentina
it's nuts.
derby is insane.
Yeah.
Like River Plate,
And the state of the
Boca
stadium.
Juniors. It's
Like, yeah.
the way they climb the fence. I mean, this is what I was saying to you earlier as well. Like these rivalries that you see in La Liga are like nothing that you get here, because it has this like undertone of political rivalry and it's socio-political, all of it. So it's whether it's the rich versus the poor, or if it's for El Clasico, like people don't even realize how deep that history is.
Yeah.
It's not just Barcelona versus Real Madrid. It's Catalonia versus the rest of Spain. It's that independence, that fight for independence versus like the ruling of a full royal family. Like it's so deeply rooted in socio-political like affairs that it makes it so much more interesting. And the Sevilla derby is like that as well.
And I felt like that filtered into the Wanderers thing.
100%.
And then the best thing that even like as a Wanderers supporter, just as a fan of football, the Sydney FC victory one was fascinating because that was just your typical two big clubs. Geographically, even though they're not close, it's kind of like that.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like a London
like
versus Manchester.
It
type
is
of
like
thing.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we come along and Victory had a very high ethnic population similar to us. So then naturally just born a massive rivalry because we did so well early on. And that was like all really fun and games. And then I felt like, I don't know, it kind of died after a while. The music kind of died when we let Del Piero go.
Yeah, agreed.
And we let Shinji go.
Yeah.
Newcastle let Heskey go, which never gets talked about. And for no matter what you say, like it's one of the biggest names the league's ever had, even though he wasn't very good. Fuck, he was pretty bad. But like, and then we replaced, I can't remember who Sydney replaced Del Piero with. Was it Ninko?
I might have been. Oh, I don't know if there was anyone between the two of them.
Yeah, there might have been one or two guys. But Sid, like we failed to replace Shinji to this day.
To this day, like you haven't really had a name like that.
Nah. Should have been Omar Abdelrahman. Said it when I was 15.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I'll show you his highlights.
You
I'll tell
really
you
do stand by that name. I love it.
But yeah, like we replaced Shinji with Vitor Saba, who I love. He still loves Wanderers. Like he still posts about them and stuff.
Love that.
Yeah. But like, and Victory kind of, do you remember Matthew Delpierre? He was failed to be replaced. I felt like that's when the music started to die.
Yes.
And Barisha got old and we haven't really replicated their day.
It's almost like it's just the momentum came down and there was no effort to kind of
Yeah.
rebuild.
And then I think they kept trying to tap in with like foreign talent. And then it took Graham Arnold of all people to go like, no, we need to take the Australians here and put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And we also need to recognize we're not competing with the European leagues. We're a feeder.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
Even
just stay in your lane. Like
Yeah.
know the role that you play in football. And if you are, like you said, a feeder for other clubs, be that and be good at it.
Yeah.
Do it well.
Yeah. And it's the
Like,
same.
don't
with
try and be something else.
Yeah. Same with like MLS. Like they still send their young guns. Like Aston Villa signed that Colombian on a $10 million deal. There's this Ferreira kid at DC United, like and Pepe. Have you seen him? He's like over in Holland. But like they still ship them out, even though they could keep them. The money's
Ship them
there.
out. Like they know their role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Argentina's the exact same. They
Yeah,
know
Argentina do that.
Benfica's going to come knocking, Porto, like
Yeah.
Ajax, they're all going to come knocking. They realize like it's just a constant cycle. We need to realize that as well.
Yeah, I agree.
It's part of the nature.
I
It works
agree.
for Argentina. It works for America for the most part. Like
And you get your talent, you have your fun with it, and then you look at what's next. Like you said, make it about developing the talent then. Like stop trying to keep the best.
Yeah.
Create the best.
yeah, 110%. And like
Yeah.
Wanderers finally did that with Brendan Borrello. It's like
They
let's
did.
bring the boy home.
Yeah.
Kwame Yeboah was kind of the experiment for that.
Yeah.
He works, but he just wanted to do modeling. But like Brendan Borrello was the same. Funnily enough, one of my mates from the mountains actually like the guy who shoots him all the time.
Do you know what's funny is my friend who knows nothing about football, she's a stylist, asked me about Kwame the other day because she has styled him on shoots before.
He doesn't tell anyone.
And she said to me, does that Kwame guy still play football? And I was like, it's a really good question. I don't think so.
Nah. Jack was telling me, shout out Jack. Yeah, Jack was saying like they didn't realize till like they eventually after a while he's like, oh yeah, here's my Instagram. Then they scroll and they're like, dude, like you a professional footballer? He's like, nah, I was. He didn't tell them, like he didn't go in. I said to Jack, like he played in the Bundesliga. Jack's like, what's that? I was like, top 5 league. Like if he was consistent there, he like becomes a national superstar. And Jack's
Insane.
like, yeah, crazy.
What are your thoughts on like footballers and athletes kind of pursuing that second? Like we talked about Josh Adokar. He's got all these other
Yeah.
things going on for himself. I have an opinion around like as long as you're kind of doing a good job on the pitch.
Or just
pursue.
having a crack. You don't even have to be performing that well.
Yeah, like
having a crack.
doing your job.
Yeah.
By all means, like go do your thing. Like I've always thought like Hector Bellerin, for example, kind of has always been able to do
Yeah.
both.
But then he kind of fucked up, didn't he?
Yeah. But I mean, he's played for some sick clubs.
Is there any girls that are like the Hector Bellerin of women football that are like just fashionable as fuck?
Well, Trinity Rodman would be
Right. I haven't heard her name before. Eh?
Dennis Rodman's
Oh,
daughter.
true. That is so
Yeah.
stupid of me.
No. But like, I don't think people realize like how famous she is
Yeah.
before even being a footballer. And on top of all of being, that Rodman's daughter,
Yeah.
being she's a I wouldn't say she's a fashionista, but she looks great and she's got this really sick Instagram and like
Yeah.
her whole image is really cool. On top of that, she's a baller as well.
Yeah.
She's the first name that comes to mind.
Yeah, right.
But I think in terms of doing it for themselves, I don't know. Like you obviously have like your Sam Kerrs and stuff that are like signed to Nike and like they're always dripped out and they look really good. But I feel like that's where men's sports a little bit further advanced because
Leveraging brands.
they
Yeah.
also probably feel like they have a bit more freedom to do things like that. Like you
Yeah.
look at, Benzema and Mount and like all these players that have like sick style and Instagrams and
Yeah.
they have fun with it because they can.
Yeah. I think the way forward, to answer your question, is the Flamini and Braithwaite approach.
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself with people who came from fuck all money, but know what to do with money, know how the language of money works.
That's a good point.
I think like the Nike brand deals and stuff, like obviously leverage them while you're got that.
While
Yeah.
you need it, yeah.
Yeah. But I think Braithwaite, for people listening, there's this Danish striker named Martin Braithwaite. Shit. He played for Barcelona and whatnot at their worst time, but he still played for them. But like average striker. And he's the 3rd richest footballer in the world technically because of the property investment company that he started with his uncle, who knew what to do with money. Like his uncle knows what to do with money. He obviously has the capital.
Yeah.
And Flamini linked up with a scientist when he was in Milan and they started the, what's it called? The environmental food company. And so they're like some of the top 10 richest footballers. I think that's the way forward.
Yeah. I think that's a great point.
Is companies that aren't like brand, like any footballer can start a brand, do the deals and stuff. But I also think it's really cool when, do you see Camavinga did the thing with Cortez?
No.
Cortez is like the big English streetwear brand at the moment.
Yeah.
They do like random things. Like they'll go to Camden Markets, do a pop-up and then shut down. And then they'll do like they'll pop up in London, put it on their story, and there's like thousands of kids there.
Oh my gosh.
And they're a black-owned brand. So what they did was any puffer jackets that you have that aren't a black-owned brand, you bring them in, you trade them in, we'll give you a Cortez puffer and we'll give those puffers to kids in need. And like, yeah, cool, eh? So Camavinga did a shoot with them and that was pretty cool. I think that's like the way forward.
I love that. I feel like if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, I'd want to be involved in stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
I definitely want to start doing that. I feel like Mitch Austin's like the only one I can kind of figure out is kind of tapping into it. Yeah. But he's not playing football at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard, but they just need people around them. Yeah. It's all about network.
Yeah. Mitch Austin's definitely done a good job of, like you said, you know, he's had challenges with his playing career because of injuries and stuff like that, things that have slowed him down.
He was so quick. Holy shit.
I mean, he shows off his FIFA cards all the time.
Yeah.
But he's, you know, like looking to diversify, and you can see kind of like he's clearly smart and innovative because he's looking at all of these other ways of like diversifying his brand.
Yeah. Diego Yota does the same.
Yeah.
Diego Yota, do you like know much about like foot champs?
No, not really.
So like that, like FIFA weekend league, which is where like Stav plays it, right?
This is the FIFA area is a very grey area for me.
Yeah. So Diego Yota was ranked #1 player in the world on FIFA. Yeah. Like at the time, which is like nuts.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
No, it kind of makes sense, but not really.
But then he started getting involved with like all the FIFA YouTubers. I think that's like cool things to do.
That's sick. Yeah.
I think that's the way forward, but I don't know. Football's is hard. NRL players and AFL players don't do it at all.
No.
They need to tap into it way more.
Yeah, they don't really do any of that. Like
unions.
Christian Petrarca having a TikTok is like the most innovative thing in the AFL.
He does well on TikTok.
He does do well. People love him.
Yeah. But unions by far the worst. They are so far behind.
Yeah. I mean, people don't really know them the way that they recognize other players.
And if you're not from New Zealand, you won't know the All Blacks, but some of the All Blacks players are the only ones that are like trying.
Yeah.
But Kiwis are naturally pretty cool, so they can kind of...
They just talk and people are like, get around it.
Yeah. Especially All Blacks. They're like seen as like gods.
Yeah.
You know
they are cool, to be fair.
Something I wanted to touch base with you on is the Saudi...
Yeah.
At the time of recording, people may be listening to this in a year. Saudi football, and for people that aren't aware, Saudi football has been given 200 billion. No, 220 billion.
No, I think it's more than that. It's
It's either 20 billion or 200 billion. The government has given it. So the clubs actually don't have that money, even though they do have a lot of money. So the Saudi government has pumped all this money into football, and basically the government is signing players. So Ronaldo was signed in January. That was very high profile. But now your Benzema and N'Golo Kante, Koulibaly, who aren't even at the age to be going, in my opinion, especially Kante.
Too young.
Yeah. And even they signed that Medeiros from Braga, who's like 25. That was interesting. So Ruben Neves, who I actually saw a Wolves post where Wolves...
I saw it too, where he was all emotional.
Yeah. It was written...
About moving?
Yeah. It was written so beautifully.
It was so nice. And then the comments were just like, sell out.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yeah, but you wouldn't say no to that much money.
But like he wrote it from the perspective like he's actually just saved Wolves financially for another year because Wolves aren't really good with their money apparently. And so apparently that 55 million is going a really long way in just sustaining current things going on. Yeah, like the way that was approached. But Ruben Neves is probably one of the best footballers I've ever seen play for a team that's outside your typical top 8. And he went to Al Hilal for 60 million, which is crazy. Wanderers beat Al Hilal 2014. They had this striker who was a rat. He spat at Spranovic. Do you remember that?
I actually don't remember.
Nasir Al Shamrami.
Your brain.
Do you not remember that? After we won it, Spranovic was like standing over him to give him a handshake.
No, I do remember. I do remember.
And then he came for the Asian Cup in 2015 and he got into a fight with his own teammate. Yeah, I can't.
We all know someone like that, though.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's all this money being pumped into it. Obviously, the big thing for viewership is like the female aspect on it.
Yes.
Widely being discussed, Ronaldo never wifed up his girlfriend at the time.
No, he got government approval to let his girlfriend enter.
So the Saudi rule was you had to be married, right? Which is rightfully so, like not rightfully so, but like
it's their culture.
Yeah, it's their culture, so to speak. And then they basically backtrack on it for Ronaldo, who, for whatever God-given reason, I'm pretty sure she's the mother of his children.
Like 4 of them.
Yeah, just not the oldest one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is not married to this woman, but they let him come into the country with her.
Yeah.
And then females aren't allowed at the games, or are they starting to?
I don't actually know the exact ins and outs
At the
of that.
start, they weren't.
No.
I remember that.
Look, I mean, we're talking about a country that, like, the women's rights are, if existent, minimal.
Yeah.
I would imagine that, say, if I lived in Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't be working and doing the things that I'm doing now. I would be far more challenged in terms of opportunity. I don't even think they have a Saudi female league. Like, I don't think women play over there. And if they do, like, it's not the same as the men's. By the way, like, I'm saying this not as somebody who's like super knowledgeable about the Saudi league. I just know that there's a lot of issues around Saudi investment in football, especially in women's football. Like, Saudi Arabia Tourism was supposed to be a major sponsor of the Women's World Cup, and they rejected it because there was so much protesting from organizations that were just essentially saying, like, you're going to let a country advertise that, like, wouldn't even give the women playing in this tournament the freedom to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's just this, there's a lot of hypocrisy. Yeah. It's hard to know where to stand on it because, like,
the thing with the sponsorship, that's so hard. Olin raised it perfectly at the time.
Yeah.
Is where's the trade-off for money that can give the opportunities to your morals?
True.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I fucking hate sellers. I hate gambling sponsors. I think it's the ugliest thing you can have on a football kit.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, we're inundated with betting all over any sport. But like, at the same time, if there's a certain amount being offered on sponsorship that we're not going to get anywhere else, is it worth taking the money and being able to put that into infrastructure for women's football? That's like, you know what I mean?
I think that's the
hard part, I find.
That's the silver lining to a difficult decision.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you can justify taking it on and showing proof that the investment is fighting the cause, then do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I think we live in a world where we're constantly challenged. Our morals are constantly challenged. In every way, shape, and form. Yeah. And like in sport, it's gambling, it's this, it's that, it's the gender inequality. It's all these things that if you look at too closely, none of it looks great.
Yeah.
Like I just mentioned earlier, like all the issues in the women's national teams. I think if FIFA can prove that that money is going somewhere good, you might get people on board. But I also think we're at such a difficult period in the growth of women's sport where players are finding their voice that they didn't have before. Like that's why you see this boycotting. That's why you see like Wendy Renard able to basically see the French manager get dismissed because she's powerful enough as a player that her speaking up will actually make internal changes. If people aren't happy with a decision like that, I feel like the ripple effects could be far worse than saying no to a sponsorship.
Yeah.
I think you take all these steps forward for women's sport and like the progress that you're making, but you can take so many steps back by accepting a sponsor that doesn't stand for like the basic human rights of females. And once again, you know, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but as an Arab woman, like I wouldn't feel at all like I'm empowered when I'm somewhere like Saudi Arabia. I don't think. And I haven't been there. Is it on my list of places to go? Probably not right now. If that changes in the future and they decide to change, you know, like the way it is for women, then by all means. But like I have a friend who moved there when we were younger. And, you know, she's always commented on how different life was there. You know, they live in complexes and they cover up when they leave their home. And I know that's the story for a lot of Muslim countries, Islamic countries, but it's not about the Islamic element. It's about just the basic human rights being not a part of like everyday conversation for women. Yeah. It's so deep.
Yeah. It's
and then it's also not that deep because it's like to me it's very obvious.
Yeah, what's fixed,
what's right and what's not.
Yeah.
Take the investment in men's football then and just make sure that there's a ripple effect and that it does benefit the women's game.
Yeah. The Middle East has a lot of problems with football at the moment. Syria and the Syria teams as well. And I'm pretty sure the women's team in Syria or Iraq had serious issues.
Afghanistan has been really bad.
What were the women's players standing up for? In which country was there civil unrest? Was
Iran.
Yeah, that was bad.
Iran was really bad. So like people, like women have died playing football in Iran.
Yeah.
And once again, it's not an area that I know heaps about, but I have a Persian friend who like knows a lot about this, and she would get very emotional about like the situation in Iran, because if her parents had chosen to stay there, like she never would have even been able to attend games.
Yeah. Crazy.
Imagine that. Like it's as simple as like allowing a female in a stadium is something that up until recently, and it's because FIFA fought for it, that women weren't allowed in stadiums. They couldn't view football. It was haram. It was like, don't you dare do that. It's not your place. Yeah. And I think like, God, like what would I have done growing up if I'd grown up somewhere like that? It would be a completely different life.
Do you know Jurgen Locadia? Played for Brighton, Dutch striker. Tattoos, very good looking man.
I probably do know them.
Looks like Memphis.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He played for Brighton before this Brighton class come through.
Okay.
So maybe like 2 or 3 years ago he was at Brighton.
I will Google him.
Yeah, he's a Dutch guy. He was rapid. But he played in Germany before that at Bochum. Could be wrong. Then he went to America after Brighton. So Brighton, he didn't really get a chance once Callum Ferguson come through and stuff like that. Or Evan. And then he goes to America. America ship him off to Persepolis, who's the biggest club in Iran for everyone listening. I think Anthony Golick played for them.
Really?
Or Sheriff. Sheriff's the other one, I think.
Sheriff's.
Or maybe that's another country. I'm so
Sheriff's
sorry for getting this
not in
wrong.
Iran.
Yeah, right. So they shift, but Locadia gets shifted off to Persepolis, and he put up a post within like 3 months, basically like, fucking get me out. Once he got out, he's a free agent still to this day. Shit. He's just living in Germany or Holland. But he put up a post on like what he saw. He didn't allow comments on it. But I was reading it and I was like, holy fuck. Because I look at transfer market like during the window, and I'd seen he went to Persepolis at the time. And I'm pretty sure Ruin Tonjik's there right now from Wanderer's old defender. And I kind of like looked at it, and then I remember if like randomly he popped up on my Instagram and I had a look at it. And I was like, holy shit. Like he was saying, like, I've seen dead bodies in the street. I've seen like miniature bombs basically of like cars getting blown up and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, like this country's fucked.
That's so messed up.
And he's like, footballers are dying. Like people in my league were dying.
That's so messed up.
Yeah. It's crazy, eh? They got a lot to fix over there.
It's a whole other, like it's just, it's another world, quite literally. And it's one of those things where, like I said, you know, football is so much more than sport, because it gives you access to information like that. Like we wouldn't have known that, and we're so censored from things like that in Australia, and like that's why even as a female who loves football, like sometimes what I do for my job like wouldn't even be possible in other countries.
Yeah.
So it's like it's being grateful and it's being like aware of that, and it's just crazy to think how different certain people's experiences are in life just because of where they live.
On a lighter note, but also on a similar note, Lebanon, men's wise, women's wise, no women's.
No, not there. There is a women's national team.
That's a start.
They've not done very well.
Yeah.
Similar with the men's.
Do you think if they tapped into Australian football and they took a similar approach to the
I hope so.
But do you
have
think
my time to shine?
You'd know girls that would be Lebanese that are actually quite good.
Yeah.
And women's football's at a level where you could take like NPL girls.
Yeah.
And they would go play.
And you could take the whole Rattle Me squad. Because they're all Lebanese anyway.
Yeah.
And just get them to represent Lebanon.
Do you think that would that?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Look,
I want my royalties.
Fair. You know what? I have to draw the comparison to like the Lebanon Rugby League team and how like 90% of that team comes from Australia.
Yeah.
They're all like dual passport, or like, you know, they have some kind of lineage to Lebanon, because they realized that in order for Lebanon to do well, like go where the talent is, go where the funding is, go where they've been kind of brought up with those facilities, and it's proving it works. Like Lebanon were able to qualify for the next one, you know, like it's stepping stones to creating a better team. I think by all means, like the Football Association of Lebanon, whatever they're called, should follow the footsteps of kind of like the rugby league and look to do the same thing because it's worked.
Why they didn't do it in the men's has shocked me so far.
Yeah. It's a great point. And to be quite honest, it's not something I'd ever really thought about. But then when you look at how successful, you know, the Lebanon rugby league team is, like, why wouldn't the football team try and do it as well?
Set up a base here.
Yeah.
And have like a train on squad.
For all we know, they're doing that.
Yeah.
And if you do know, like,
yeah,
let us know, because I wouldn't be surprised if there is a connection to certain clubs here, and if they're keeping an eye on talent. I think it might also just be a case of like if a Lebanese Australian is good enough here, are they vying to play for Lebanon, or are they hoping for that Australia spot?
Yes.
And then you've got the Volpato conversation all over again, and nobody wants to have that conversation. But I guess it's that idea of like big fish in a small pond, or, you know, try and make it big here in Australia.
Yeah. I noticed with Lebanese players, a lot of them are in Sweden.
There's a large Lebanese population in Sweden. There's a few countries randomly in Europe and whatnot that have quite large Lebanese populations. Sweden's one of them.
Yeah.
Don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. And also if they're half Swedish, then they're going to have some height on them too.
Yeah.
So why not?
Volpato conversation quickly. What are your thoughts? Because I'm happy to share mine.
I kind of want to hear yours first, because you're the Italian Australian. Like, you're the one who like can kind of put yourself into his shoes.
Yeah. If I'm him and I get chewed up and spat out by Australian football, why would I not pick Italy?
Yeah.
Saying that, being an Italian fan, Chiesa, Tonali, he doesn't have much of a chance.
Yeah.
It
goes both ways, right?
Yeah, God love him. Like, have a fucking crack, right?
Yeah.
But also being a Serie A fan, Zaleski is like this Polish kid that Mourinho puts all his faith into on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. He's a wing-back. And he puts his faith into kids randomly, Mourinho.
Yeah.
One would wonder why not Volpato.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. And like, they're saying, oh, go to Sassuolo. I still don't think, besides Berardi, you actually have an Italian footballer there. They've produced Raspadori and Scamacca. So it's kind of like, if you just look at stats and history, what's to say he will represent Italy? And if he does, it won't be consistent.
Yeah.
I think he should choose Australia. But do I blame a man? He got, like, Jed played with him at Wanderers.
No, I know. He copped it.
Like, he just got chewed up, spat out, and like Italy took a chance on him, like the Italian system. And we wouldn't have even the choice of him if he stayed in this country. Like, there's no Volpato if he stays in Australia. You know what I mean? So,
I think I agree with you. I think I also grew up in the same area as Volpato. Like, he went to Joey's. I went to the school down the road from there, and I kind of knew of him all through high school in terms of like him being one of the best players there. And as far as I know, you know, he showed a lot of talent from day one, but he wasn't given the opportunities. And whether that is, and I like to play devil's advocate, you know, like there are always more than one side to the story, you know. There's the attitude thing, there's having a chip on your shoulder if you feel like you're hard done by and you don't give, you know, it's where you put your energy as well. It's like, how are you trying to develop those relationships, or are you bitter and you're just waiting for an opportunity to leave? Like, that's not me saying that that's what he was like, but I always wonder, like, if you feel that way and you're willing to go, do you even really want to play for Australia? Like, is there that as well? But as somebody who, like, you know, if the opportunity was there, I could play for Lebanon, Australia, or Ireland because my mum's Irish. I don't know where I would play. Would you just go where you're going to do better?
yeah.
It's that question again.
Where you're going to play more.
Yeah, where you're going to play more, exactly.
Yeah.
Where's going to develop you better?
Yeah.
You might develop better in Italy, but you'd get more game time in Australia. So, like, that's your decision to make. I agree with you wholeheartedly, though, that if he feels hard done by, then by all means, like, play where you feel wanted, play where you feel respected, where you're valued.
I couldn't believe he turned down the World Cup at the last minute.
Yeah.
So for people listening, Volpato got a call from Arnie. Arnie's words, I think days before. I think the night before.
No, it was day. I think it was the night before the squad was picked, because then it kind of made headlines.
Yeah, Arnie basically called him and said, "You've got a spot. Do you want it?" And he said no. The other thing is, like, I don't know who's in his team. That's the other thing.
I also know from, Jonah Football.
Yeah.
Jonah Football knows Volpato very well.
Yeah, because he trained him, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said that Volpato called him about the Arnie call and was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say this.
No, that's fine. We can cut it out if you want.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to say anything bad.
Yeah.
Like, they're very close. Like, he obviously called people close to him and said, like, give me, like, what should I do? And I think Jonah also encouraged him to make the decision that felt most right for him and his journey. And he did that. And that's what he did. And I think he copped too much slack for that. Like, I do feel bad for him because we're all going to make decisions in our career that, like, if done on a stage in front of people, high profile, plenty of people are going to disagree with the choice that we decide to make. But I think, he did what was right for him.
Also think with Volpato is this sounds horrible because he's Australian. I hate tall poppy syndrome, right? But like watching the football, he's not as good as people are trying to make themselves believe. He doesn't play as much for Roma as people want to think. Yeah. And he plays in the Primavera and he was actually MVP, which is like the under-23s league. Yeah. But like I'd rather see him instead he be playing and he would be my first pick or like, I don't know, Swedish first division, Danish first division. If he's playing every week in like a division full of men that are competing in Champions League, Conference League, that's when you'd like pick him and that's when I'd be way more torn on it. Like he's still a kid.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
He's still young.
Yeah. And if
never
he does
say
pick
no,
it,
like never say no, right? Like it's still, the conversation's still ongoing.
Yeah. But in saying that, like the new generation is kind of like, we're in good hands. But it's kind of, I always get scared because I'm like, are we going to fuck it up now? Now, when we're like...
Yeah, but that's like the imminent threat of fucking up is always there.
Yeah. But Nestroy and Garansky are like just...
Garansky.
Yeah, he's the goat, that kid. But yeah, those two just kind of like, I think they alleviated the pressure of the conversation.
100%.
Especially Nestroy. Because Garang kind of like was already...
he's so good, man. And he's so young.
I don't know how he can be that good that young.
No.
I don't know how he can have a foot like that.
No.
Like the power he generates.
It's beyond his years.
Yeah. But he's still a kid. Like when you see him like walking around, you're like, you are 17. But on a football pitch, you're like, you should be like 28. Like the way you play is so beyond your years. But yeah, I think it's a very exciting time we're in. And I'm glad that conversation kind of subdued because funnily enough, like other countries have it about our players. Like there's a kid called Tristan Hammond who plays in Austria. He's Peruvian. There was a massive conversation for Peru heading into the World Cup. Like, do we want to cap this kid? We weren't even looking at him. Like in their qualifiers, they were like, oh, we want to get this kid. He currently represents Australia. Alex Robertson's another one.
Yeah.
Peru hate us, not because we knocked them out, but because like they've actually got a few players that could represent.
Yeah, because they're both.
Yeah. Alex Robertson was a big one. That's the one that I'm most excited about. If you're in a treble winning team, any competition in the world, yet alone to be Man City, you're going to know something about something along the way.
You're going to know a little something.
Especially with this morning, Gundogan left. So very exciting times for our national team. But
no, I think you're right. We're in good hands. Like there's a lot of emerging talent. And I think the World Cup showed us that as well. We've got it.
Yeah.
Like, we know what we need and we've got like the momentum that we need as well. And I think we've got the right people involved in the game. Yeah. And the bigger the game gets, the better because that talent will find itself.
Yeah. Well, that was like Central Coast. Like you and I both know where Silvera's going.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's public. Heading overseas. And then you had Nectar, who's a Wanderers. Wanderers are fucking it up. But they fucked it up with Volpato and now they fucked it up with Triantis. He's going to Sunderland, which is a massive club. It's so impressive. So, yeah, Wanderers fuck it up a bit. But Triantis going over to Sunderland and, like, Harry Souttar making his way up to the Premier League from the Socceroos game.
And then being relegated.
Being relegated back down. That sucks so much, but unlucky to him. And then we've obviously got, like, taken over the Scottish League. And then the Belgian League signed 3 in the one window.
It's fucked, hey.
Jordan Boss, Aiden O'Neill, and Keegan.
Boss is so good.
Yelisic. Boss against Argentina was very impressive. Yes. I thought he'd get just hammered.
Yeah.
I rate him highly. I think he's probably City's best prospect. Oh, Tilio's heading over as well to Scotland. I thought Boss would get hammered, and he I saw online like Argentinians commenting like, I wonder if this kid is this kid stuck in Australia making fun of our league, but
Dead. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, but they were like, I wonder where this kid's going to end up. They were just And it's funny to see like other national teams be like, oh fuck, like this kid.
Yeah, like noticing the talent.
Yeah. It was the same with Arzani against France. It was like
Yeah.
French people were very invested as to like, oh, is this kid in Australia still, or like what's he
Yeah.
doing? Like,
Yeah.
does he want to come over here?
Isn't that funny?
But look, we'll finish it up because it's 9:30. It's been 2.5 hours. It's actually quite impressive.
Is this also the longest one you've done? Or?
Yeah, this is most probably the longest one I've done. Finally, best advice for young people trying to find their way in life. You went through it.
I did.
You were
I'll
in a good
touch on
career,
it
it seems. Hey.
I love my job. Like
Yeah.
I genuinely, I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
but I'm working on Optus Sport. I'm presenting, like a daily football show. Life's good. I love what I do. I feel very privileged to like be where I'm at now, like very grateful for it. But, it's taken a hot minute to get there, and it's been a weird journey. It wasn't a linear, like traditional journalism journey by any means. It was kind of like I always knew what I wanted to do, and it was just about taking steps that would get me a little bit closer every time. My advice would be what Jules Breach taught me. And, granted, if you can have a role model or like identify somebody who's kind of in the position that you want to be in, find a way to reach out to them and ask them questions and do those things, because like if you don't ask, the answer's always no.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to meet Jules, and her advice was so straightforward. But like I always think about it whenever I'm kind of procrastinating the next step. And it was like, just start. Don't be a perfectionist about it. Have high standards for yourself. But if you're thinking about starting a blog or starting an Instagram page or starting a TikTok and telling stories and doing your whatever the content is that you're kind of thinking of, just start.
Yeah.
Because there will never be the perfect time. You will never have all your ducks in a row where you'll just know everything and it will feel right. And I'm sure you can vouch for this yourself.
Yeah.
That one day you just had to make the call. I've sat on this idea for a little while. I'm just going to do it. And that's what I did. And I got a little better every time. I would do it again. But like if you don't start, it's just sitting there as an idea. So I think where I am right now was a culmination of like all the little steps that I made, and they eventually snowball because you meet the right people and they help you, find that next opportunity. But ultimately, like the power is within yourself, and with social media and technology these days, like everybody can create.
Yeah.
So my advice is just start.
I 110% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even the Sunday League things that I
Yeah.
put up, one of them got 100K on TikTok.
I love
That's
those.
mental.
It's such good content. It's fun.
Fuck, I cop it at the games today. It's pretty bad.
Who cares? It's fun. They say you kind of get judged or whatever for
Yeah.
those things when you've got a few viewers, but all of a sudden, you've got 100,000 and people wish they'd done it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like every next piece that you make could be the thing that leads you to that next big opportunity. And it's nice to see it like that because it keeps it exciting.
Yeah. I think, you just got to do it. Big guy in football that's just doing it while I'm at it is like Joe Kay. Did you see his series he started? Yeah.
Joe Kay, I had him on my BN Sports show in December. And, he had one of the smaller followings of like the people that we had on. But I made sure to have people on that just knew about the game and that were passionate. And he sat down and he knows so much about the game, and he's so between the men's and the women's and like showing love for like all aspects of the game.
Yeah.
He deserves every success, and it's really cool to see creators like that doing their thing.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
He's like, he did what I thought about doing it, but I was like, I can't dedicate the time because I play on Sundays.
Yeah.
But he did like the around the B League where he's going to the games, showing people.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
That's what it's all about.
That's commitment, and that's passion, and that's something you're never going to get from a broadcaster. Like that same amount of passion that you get from that independent creator who like he's spending money out of his own pocket to go and create that content for people. It's amazing.
Yeah. I say this with like the most sincere compliment. Joe, I know you're listening. Les Murray would love that shit.
Oh, he would absolutely love it.
Yeah. There's so many of Australian football in pastimes that would like adore that content if they were around to see it. Like
I agree.
That's the epitome of everything we should be doing.
That's what it's all about.
But look, we're going to end it here. Where can people find you on socials?
at Kat Haddad. That's Haddad, because people always get my surname wrong. I'm on TikTok as well, kicking off with Kat. And you can check out Optus Sport, YouTube, and the app if you're on it. And I'll be all over their socials for the World Cup too. So check it out.
How exciting.
Yeah.
That all starts in like a week, you reckon, or 2 weeks for coverage?
So the coverage will start, I'm pretty sure, like game day 1. So the 20th of July, but socials will be covering kind of like that lead up to the first game from probably like the 16th or something.
Have they played many games beforehand, or they're not playing any?
There's one game that they're playing called like the farewell game, but it's actually more of like warm up game for the World Cup. But I don't know if they're playing before that.
Yeah, wow.
But that's in 2 weeks anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the men's don't really, they play like pretty far out, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
don't they? Or maybe they have one game before.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what this farewell game is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm like, don't play too much, girls. Like, let's save the injuries, look after yourselves. It'll be very interesting when I'm in camp to see kind of like what the vibe is. Sick. Yeah. I don't know how much contact I'll have with the girls directly. I mean, they're in the middle of training for a World Cup, but it'll be cool just for the energy and the vibe to see what's going on.
What's cracking.
Yeah.
As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you next week.